Thank you, Mayor. I have my devices rolling, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening. This is the City of Morro Bay City Council meeting. It is our regular meeting. It is Tuesday, October the 12th, 2021. It is 5:30 p.m. and we are being held via teleconference. And I'll ask the clerk if she could to establish a quorum this evening, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Here.
Councilmember Barton? Councilmember Barton?
Here.
Councilmember Ford?
Here.
Councilmember Heller?
Here.
And Mayor Heading.
Present. We do have a quorum. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Executive Order N-08-21 issued by Governor Newsom on June 11th, 2021, this meeting will be conducted telephonically through Zoom and broadcast live on cable channel 20 and streamed on the city website. Please be advised that pursuant to the executive order and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, the Veterans Hall will not be open for this meeting. Thank you. And with that, I would like to ask in your own way, if we could just take a moment of silence, remembering those in need, please. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And if we could have our flag, I will go ahead and call for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and I'll ask our esteemed city attorney, Mr. Newmeyer, do we have a closed session report, sir?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. No closed session items to report tonight.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it very much. With that, we'll go ahead and start this evening with our council member presentations and announcements. Let's go ahead and start with Council Member Addis this evening. Council Member Addis, please.
Good evening, Mayor, and thank you. I do have 3 announcements. I was at HAB last week, and they had an in-depth and robust conversation around the recent parking studies. So I wanted to say thank you to HAB for spending so much thoughtful time on that. And then I was able to tour the Maritime Museum on Sunday and discovered that my membership has lagged. So I re-upped my membership and just want to encourage all of you in the community to do the same. There's wonderful things happening at the Maritime Museum. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to the hundreds of people who attended the Reproductive Rights Rally on October 2nd, downtown San Luis Obispo, including Councilmember Ford, who was a volunteer there. So a very special thank you. And there were numerous Morro Bay residents in attendance, and numerous Morro Bay residents have written to me saying thank you and appreciating local people speaking up around SB 8 in Texas. And that's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Addis. Very much appreciate that. And thank you for the reminder to re-up my membership as well in the Maritime Museum. I'll get that taken care of. Councilmember Heller, sir, please.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of announcements. One is there have been a lot of questions about recycling centers in the county, and a lot of them have gone away. But within the last month or so, we had a new one open up next to Spencer's Market for those of you who want to take your bottles and cans and recycle them. I believe it's open Monday through Friday. I'm not sure about the hours, but that is open now next to Spencer's. What else? We have a free COVID testing site at the Vets Hall, in case you're wondering about that, Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, I believe. Also, if you want the latest and greatest on getting vaccinated, recoverslow.org is still the best website. We're still looking to increase the number of people in Morro Bay who are fully vaccinated. It's the best defense that you can do for yourself and your friends and your family. And lastly, I am all about trash and talking trash and organic waste. If you're interested in me talking to a small group or your formal group, please let me know. 805-471-1257. That is all. Thank you, Mayor.
There you go, talking trash again. All right.
Yep.
Mr. Heller, we appreciate that. Councilmember Barton, anything for us this evening?
I too visited the Maritime Museum yesterday and was very impressed with the work that they've done and the amount of funds that have been raised there. It's really a great group who has brought this about and are planning to make some expansions. So it's I'm really pleased to see that. Second thing, I got my COVID booster shot last week, so I am now fully vaccinated again. So anyway, so I would suggest that for other people if you are ready for that booster shot. They're easy to find online.
Great, and thank you for that note, that health note. You all have taken my report this evening by reporting on COVID-19 and vaccinations and health. Councilmember Ford, welcome this evening, and your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Heading. I also want to point out that, Councilmember Heller mentioned the testing site at the Vets Hall, and myself and my family have used it several times in the past, and it's really a great it was a great experience every single time that we used it. So, and I'm just grateful that we had that opportunity to have it here. So please use it if you need it. I have a couple of announcements. One of them is a huge thank you and a shout out to Peter Williamson of Slow Cog, who invited council to come out to National Walk to School Day. And council member Addis and myself joined Delmar Elementary and their principal, Mr. Wood, and a ton of students. I mean, gosh, I don't even know how many students were there, but we met at Spencer's Market and we walked and biked over to Delmar Elementary, and we were escorted by our Morro Bay Police Department, and it was so much fun. The kids were just jumping up and down in excitement. It was great to see them excited to get to school, but in a really fun, united way with their friends and families. And then my second announcement is a huge congratulations to Friends of the Harbor Department. They recently announced that they achieved their $100,000 goal for fundraising to help retrofit their newly purchased patrol boat that they're that's currently being fixed up and should be ready by I believe April of next year. So they're hoping to get that out there because it's greatly needed for our harbor and our safety. And I'm really proud of our community and even others from outside of our community for pitching in and making that happen, as well as artists and other people who donated items for auction and things like that. So it was just a great community effort. And lastly, I know I talked about this last time, but I believe this is our last meeting before the concert that's coming up in the Cloisters. It's sponsored by our City of Morro Bay and our Rec and Park Department, Kirk Carmichael and all of their crew. They're working really hard to make this happen, along with a committee of community members that are working really hard. LP and the Vinyl are coming on it's a Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. on October 24th. And again, it's free. Bring your chairs, bring your own food and beverages, but please no alcohol. So that's all I've got for you this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that report. Very much appreciated. Just a very short addition. Thank you all for speaking to COVID-19 and some of the current conditions of the county. We are improving rather dramatically. I think caution is the right approach to take at this time. Vaccination rates, as Councilmember Heller, are the issue. We're still just at about 30% unvaccinated in this county, which is very concerning. There are numerous outlets available, not only in this community, but across the county, where there are free vaccines for everybody. And I highly suggest that you consider getting vaccinated. And if you have questions, please speak to your physician or healthcare provider about those questions. Additionally, there is a national shortage of over-the-counter COVID-19 rapid tests. Unfortunately, if you go to your pharmacy, you may not find them on the shelves. However, as mentioned previously, Morro Bay does have the testing site at the Veterans Hall, easy access, and no appointment needed. So please utilize that if need be. And a number of local pharmacies also are providing COVID-19 tests. But again, the rapid test appears to be unavailable. Just a short report on the Air Pollution Control District Board. I am chair this year of the board. The board is facing, or the district is facing, about a 33% reduction in its funding as a result of the closure of Phillips 66. And so the agency has been looking at ways to mitigate those losses. That entity itself, via its permitting fees, covered about a third of the expenses to actually fund that organization. There is a subgroup working now trying to minimize the impact potentially on communities in terms of any fees for city jurisdictions or county jurisdictions, and I'll report further on that. In addition to that, good progress is being made in the Napomo Dunes issue with regard to off-road or off-highway riding on the beach. Significant reductions in air quality particulate matter have occurred to the tune of about 40%, which is very significant. So good progress being made there, more to follow soon with regard to that. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Collins. Do you have a report for us tonight, Scott?
I do, Mayor and council members. Thank you, Scott Collins, City Manager. Just two quick notes, and then I'm going to pass it over to our Public Works Director, Greg Kwolek, for a quick update on a couple items. It appears that we will have a discussion for City Council on the decommissioned Morro Bay Power Plant exhaust stacks, or stacks for short, on the council meeting, next meeting on the 26th of October at 5:30. And we also, I think, will have a follow-up to our City Goals workshop that occurred last Wednesday at that same council meeting on 10/26 of later this month. And then I also believe we'll have a discussion for City Council on our parking study at the November 9th council meeting. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Greg Kwolek to give a couple important updates.
Man, welcome, Greg. Hopefully.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just sign in. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I do have two updates. One is more of a general update about our water. We have received many questions about the odor and the taste of the water over the past week. I do want to say to all of our water customers that this odor and taste is completely harmless. This happens just about every year here, and it is a result of an algae bloom that is happening along the State Water Project. And so a byproduct of that algae bloom is something called geosmin, Geosmin. You could look it up, and it does produce that odor and taste, but it is completely safe. Our water meets all drinking standards. And if you don't like the taste and want to remove it, you can run the water through a Brita filter or an activated charcoal filter, and it will remove it. You can also chill the water, and that will reduce the odor and taste. So I also have a quick announcement, and I'm going to share my screen. The Public Works Department is holding a visioning meeting, a community visioning meeting on the Coleman Park Harbor Walk area. We have 2 meeting dates, and the meetings are going to be on site. So we have a morning meeting for folks for whom that's more convenient, and then that will be on Tuesday of next week, and then Wednesday of next week at 5:30 p.m. We'll also have another one on site. We're going to have blank maps of the area, and we're going to bring some Sharpie markers so people can actually draw out their ideas. We really just want ideas from community members and from stakeholders. We are using this information to apply for a state grant called the Regional Parks Program. And right now we are putting together a concept, but we want to start with the community ideas first. So if you also can't make any of these meetings, you can contact Pam Newman, Assistant Engineer, and her contact information is below here. She's at pnewman@morrobayca.gov. She also can email you a blank map, and you can share your ideas with her. If you want to draw on the blank map and return it, we'd love that. And it's also, if you go to our website, morrobayca.gov, you can get a blank map and more information about this project under the Hot Topics section. So that's all my updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that very much. And with that, that will go ahead and move us to our presentations. We have three significant presentations this evening. I will apologize in advance if my pronunciation of any of your names is not absolutely correct, and you can feel free to correct me. The first presentation is a resolution commemorating the landing of the first Filipinos in the United States. And I want to go ahead and welcome Jessica Gillette, Rosalie Marquez, and Rose Sagizi. And Rose, I apologize if I messed that one up, but I hope I'm close. So let's go ahead and promote them. I think I see you all on the screen.
They are there, yes.
There we go. I'll have to change my view to make sure you're all there. There we go. Okay, fantastic. This is a resolution actually of the City of Morro Bay City Council regarding the cultural significance of Morro Bay for the Filipino American community this evening. And I'm going to go ahead and read this. And it's with a very thankful heart that I share this resolution with you this evening. It says, whereas the importance of Morro Bay to the Filipino community and the Filipino American National Historical Society cannot be overstated, and whereas the City Council and staff of the City of Morro Bay recognize the importance of honoring the Filipino history, culture, and contributions to the United States, California, and the Central Coast and Morro Bay specifically. And whereas on October 18th, 1857, Luzon Indios came ashore from the Spanish galleon Nuestra Senora de Espinosa and landed at what is now Morro Bay, California, representing a monumental moment in the history as the first Filipinos landed in North America. Imagine that, how amazing, Morro Bay. Whereas the city worked closely with FANHS in establishing a historical monument in October originally of 1995, locating the historical marker near Coleman Beach to honor this important moment in history and the connection between the Filipino-American history and Morro Bay. And whereas the city has recognized Filipino-American History Month in October for several years since that time, as Filipino-Americans represent the second largest Asian American group in the nation and the third largest ethnic group in California, and have made an indelible contribution to our country and the state of California. And whereas with violence and discrimination against Asian Americans and Pacific Islander communities on the rise in our country, it is more important than ever to support and honor the Filipino community and FANHS and take further measures to relay that importance and speak support from the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Morro Bay and the City Council will expand and support FANHS by committing to doing the following. And we're proud of this. One, relocating the historical monument to a more appropriate and visible location between Coleman Park and and Morro Rock. Number 2, support FANHS and other Filipino organizations in planning to host a rededication ceremony of the monument in the new location in October of 2022, and we look forward to that. Work with the Central Coast of California chapter of FANHS to establish signage expressing the importance of the historical monument and the history of Filipino Americans. Then adding landscaping at the new location of the monument that includes, if at all possible, native plants of the Philippines. Number 5, install lighting around the new location of the monument. Number 6, ensure that no structures are built or objects placed in close proximity around the monument that would obstruct it and the view of Morro Rock from that specific location. Number 7, we will continue to honor Filipino American History Month each October. And lastly, and not least, we will seek further opportunities to support the FANHS and collectively address violence and hate against Asian Americans and Pacific Islander communities. And the relocation and the site is absolutely beautiful. The monument is outstanding. And I just wanted to offer the opportunity for a quick comment from either Jessica, Rosalie, or Rose, if you'd like to speak at this time.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, and community members. My name is Jessica Gillette, a Filipino American born in the Philippines and a longtime California resident. I am an attorney who has represented public entities, including cities and counties throughout Southern California. For my 2 decades of representing public entities, I have become deeply aware of the many issues and challenges that public entities face. I therefore stand before you to express my appreciation for the quick actions of the City of Morro Bay in acknowledging the concerns I raised last year regarding the condition of the monument that commemorates the October 18, 1587 landing of the first Filipinos in North America. Not long after I emailed the city, I immediately began receiving responses from city officials expressing their sincere apologies and an invitation to continue the dialogue on how to better honor this historical landmark. Scott Collins has been instrumental in researching an appropriate site for the location of the monument. Thank you to the City of Morro Bay for this opportunity to stand before you to discuss the resolution that recognizes this historical landmark and the cultural connection between the City of Morro Bay and the Filipino American community. I am grateful that you have chosen October, the Filipino American History Month, to have this resolution heard. Growing up, Filipino American history was not something I was taught in school. It was not until college that I learned about the setbacks and discrimination faced by my ancestors in the United States. In pursuit of the American dream, they persevered and continued to make significant contributions to our country. Thank you for providing a reminder of the rich diversity of the American people, to include the contributions of Filipino Americans to the development and advancement of the United States. I also thank you for recognizing that inclusiveness is a critical benchmark of a successful community, especially at a time when there is a rise in discrimination and violence against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. The Filipino American National Historical Society and various Filipino organizations across the country look forward to the continued partnership with the City of Morro Bay as we embark on the planning of the rededication ceremony of the monument at its new location for October 2022. Again, thank you for your support of the Filipino American community.
Thank you, Jessica, for those kind words. And again, we appreciate the opportunity to have ongoing dialogue and to work together with you and members of your group to make the realization of this new monument a reality. And so thank you again for being here this evening. The second presentation this evening is...
Mayor, I would like to speak.
Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Mayor Heading and City Council members. I am Rosalie Salute Marquez. I am the former president and the vice president of the Filipino American National Historical Society, the California Central Coast chapter, and all of and in behalf of our national organization and the Filipino organization, we want to thank you for this historic step in relocating the monument. I had a Zoom meeting with a national organization all the way from New York to Hawaii, and they're really pleased. We showed a picture of a new location, so they're really pleased with that. We'd like to thank and acknowledge Jessica Gillette for bringing this situation to our attention and instrumentally contacting the city and the concerns. And we also like to thank the city of Morro Bay and Scott Collins for quickly rectifying the situation, making recommendations for the relocation. As you know, that this month is Filipino American History Month, with legislation passed by the state of California and congressionally recognizing October as Filipino American. With this history of Morro Bay having the first Filipinos stepping foot, and then for the pioneer Filipinos that followed thereafter, that strive to survive the obstacles and make a better life for themselves, as well as pave the way for the future generation. And we are proud to be Filipino Americans and be part of the Morro Bay city. With the relocation, a national organization and the Filipino organization will plan a rededication tentatively scheduled for Saturday, October the 22nd, 2022. So we'll be contacting you for a resolution, a proclamation. Again, we'd like to thank you for your support and your location. I will be meeting with a student from Cal Poly. I work closely with Professor Gracie at Ethnic Studies, but this student from Cal Poly is working on a senior thesis, and she's a landscaping architect. And so I like to get her input also and then feed it to Scott. So I want to thank you again for giving us the opportunity to speak and for your quick action and your sincere support. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Rosalie. I'm sorry I didn't realize you were ready to speak, but thank you so much for those kind words. And again, a great partnership that we look forward to in the future. All right. Thank you. And that brings us to our second presentation. And this evening we have with us Chelsea Dixon from the Lumina Alliance Board. And let's go ahead and promote Chelsea. And this is a proclamation from the City Council of the City of Morro Bay, recognizing October 2021 as Domestic Violence Action Month. And the proclamation reads, whereas Domestic Violence Action Month calls attention to the fact that sexual and intimate partner violence is widespread and impacts every person in Morro Bay. And whereas Rise and Stand Strong officially merged on July 1st, 2021 to form Lumina Alliance, an agency that serves survivors of sexual and intimate partner violence throughout all of San Luis Obispo County. And whereas although progress has been made towards preventing and ending domestic violence and providing support to survivors and their families, important work, as we all know, remains to be done. Whereas there is a need to focus on individualized needs of domestic violence survivors, whereas the marginalization of certain groups in society, including undocumented individuals, transgender individuals, and those living with disabilities, increases their vulnerability to intimate partner violence. And whereas Lumina Alliance continues to provide a safe environment to those affected by domestic violence and crisis intervention, counseling, education, legal services, and emergency safe housing with the help of dedicated volunteers and professionals. And whereas Lumina Alliance has provided services to more than 1,800 clients in the last year, and that's an amazing statistic, not the fact that it's a large number of people to serve, but that there are that many incidents, and that including more than 800,000 collective nights provided shelter clients and more than 6,400 hours of counseling. And whereas Lumina Alliance has created San Luis Obispo's first social marketing campaign called Redefine Slow, focused on parents and educators of preteen boys in an effort to prioritize frequent and quality conversations on topics such as gender, masculinity, and consent in an effort to prevent violence, harm, and an assault in our community. Whereas the City of Morro Bay strongly supports the efforts of Lumina Alliance, how every segment of our society can work together to better address intimate partner violence and how to help survivors connect with services. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Morro Bay City Council does hereby recognize the important work done by domestic violence programs, do hereby proclaim the month of October to be National Domestic Violence Action Month. And so, Chelsea, if you're with us this evening, we'd love to hear a few words from you.
Mayor, this is Anthony from AGP Video. I have Holly West here.
Okay.
I've already promoted to panelist. I believe she is here for that.
Holly, welcome this evening.
I am. Thank you. Sorry about that. Chelsea had a family emergency, but I appreciate y'all's flexibility and promoting me to be a panelist. So thank you to Mayor Heading and to the City Council for this proclamation. My name is Holly West, and I am the Events and Communications Coordinator for Lumina Alliance. So Lumina Alliance, as mentioned, is a nonprofit organization created by the merger of Rise and Stand Strong in July 2021. And our mission is to empower those impacted by sexual and intimate partner violence through innovative advocacy, healing, and prevention programs. With our newly formed alliance, we're able to expand our reach and serve all of San Luis Obispo County as one consolidated agency. And this merger also allows us to streamline services for those seeking support, ensuring their experience is easy to navigate and as trauma-informed as possible. Services include a 24-hour crisis and information line, case management, restraining order assistance, legal assistance, accompaniment and advocacy, 3 emergency shelters throughout the county, transitional housing, individual and group therapy, and a robust prevention education department. As previously mentioned, October is Domestic Violence Action Month. This year, we're focused on the belief that eliminating gender-based violence is possible if we redefine how love is portrayed and demonstrated in our culture today. Our new Redefine Slow campaign provides resources for parents to engage in conversations with young men and boys about love, communication, and healthy masculinity, in an effort to stop violence before it even begins. We hope this month inspires our community to start conversations with their families and join us in the effort to eliminate intimate partner violence from our community. We invite you to visit redefineslow.org to learn more. Lumina Alliance is also hosting several events throughout this month in partnership with Cal Poly Safer. You can stay updated on Domestic Violence Action Month events by following us, Lumina Alliance, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And please remember, if you or anyone you know is experiencing sexual or intimate partner violence and needs help, they can call 805-545-8888 at any time of day to speak to one of our confidential advocates, completely free of charge. In closing, we're so grateful for this proclamation and the ongoing support of the Morro Bay City Council. On behalf of Lumina Alliance's Board of Directors, staff, and volunteers, we thank all of you for taking action this month to create our vision of a safe, thriving, and equitable community.
Holly, thank you so much for being here tonight, and please pass on our thanks to your board and all of your staff members for what you're doing in this county to raise awareness. And I especially appreciate the emphasis on early education and awareness for individuals regarding this issue. Thank you so much. With that, we have a third proclamation this evening, and I'm happy to introduce Rita Casaverde, who is here with us. She's a board member and assistant to Congressman Carbajal. And Rita, I'd like to present this proclamation. It's a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Morro Bay recognizing September 15th through October 15th, 2021 as National Hispanic Heritage Month. And the proclamation reads, whereas the City of Morro Bay is welcoming, inclusive, and dedicated to improving the quality of life for those who live, work, and visit here. And whereas what began in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Johnson and was expanded by President Reagan in 1988 to cover a 30-day period starting on September 15th, the United States observes Hispanic Heritage Month, and whereas Hispanic Heritage Month celebrates the histories, cultures, contributions of those whose ancestors came to America from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America, and whereas the purpose of Hispanic Heritage Month is to create awareness of the contributions of people of Hispanic heritage to the American culture. Many people of Hispanic heritage serve as civil rights leaders and community organizers, politicians, teachers, journalists, first responders, artists, healthcare professionals, athletes, inventors, entertainers, and much more. And whereas Hispanic Heritage Month is tied to the celebration of the rich tapestry of our community and reflects an array of distinct cultures. And whereas Morro Bay is fortunate to count among its population a large number of residents of Spanish and Latin American descent who grow businesses, offer innovative ideas, strengthen our economy, create jobs, and contribute to our daily lives. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Morro Bay City Council does hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2021 as National Hispanic Heritage Month, and invite the community to learn more of the Hispanic culture, people, traditions, and values that have positively enhanced our community. Thank you so much for being here. And Rita, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Mayor Heading, and thank you, council members. My name is Rita Casaverde, and I'm here representing the Latino Outreach Council. As a board member, it's an honor to accept this proclamation. We see the work that the city of Morro Bay has been doing to support the Hispanic and Latinx community, and thank you so much for recognizing our contributions and our presence. On behalf of the Latino Outreach Council, I would like to thank every single member in this proclamation. I really appreciate your support and recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. We appreciate you being here this evening, and thank you so much. With that, that ends our presentations tonight. That brings us to public comment. This is general public comment. This is public comment for items that are on the agenda for which you cannot stay and you'd like to speak to now, or public comment for issues in general that you'd like to bring forward to the City Council. So with that, Anthony, we'll go ahead and open up public comment. Each speaker would have 3 minutes. And do we have any public comments, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I see a couple hands raised, actually more than a couple now, but
okay.
Mike Taylor, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Mike Taylor, you are unmuted.
Welcome, Mike.
All right. Hopefully he's... I'm going to move to Mike Taylor. Are you there? Mayor, I'm going to move to Shauna Paulson.
Okay, and if Mike wants to come back in, if we get him, that's no problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, Shauna.
Welcome, Shauna.
Thank you. As it said, my name is Shana Paulson. I work at the Community Action Partnership of San Luis Obispo and the Child Care Resource Connection, but I'm here tonight for the We Are the Care initiative. I know you've heard over the past few years from the We Are the Care initiative group, and I also know that your liaison, Councilmember Addis, has kept you apprised of our local child care crisis and just really the importance of child care for our community. Tonight, I'm excited to share with you that we have some new data. There was a recent study that was conducted by BW Research. It was commissioned by Cuesta College, and it looks at the economic impact of the childcare industry here in San Luis Obispo County. So the report substantiates what we already know, which is that childcare is truly essential in our society and for our local economy. So there are a couple key findings I want to share with you. The first is that most childcare workers can work full-time and still not earn a living wage. So a living wage for a single adult with no dependents in San Luis Obispo County is about $38,400 per year. The average earnings for a childcare worker in our county is $27,200. That's only 71% of the living wage. The second thing is something that won't be a surprise to you. Childcare is expensive, but what you may not know is that child workers themselves likely cannot afford the full cost of care for their own children. So the cost of care for one child in our county is roughly $10,000 a year. Remember, they may only be earning $27,000. Another thing you've probably heard is that there's a large need for additional childcare capacity or slots for children in our county. Conservative estimates suggest that 2,300 children in our county have working parents, but the children themselves may not be enrolled in a local childcare program. So the report really dug in on return on investment information. They found that if we were to look forward and meet 100% of the low-end estimate of potential need for care in our county, that would be about 1,400 children, we could increase the gross regional product, or GRP, by more than $108 million annually and support and create 425 jobs from this new economic activity. If we were to try to meet the entirety of the high end estimate for the potential childcare demand, that would be 9,300 children. We would have, of course, an even greater economic impact. This would contribute $734 million to our GRP, which is roughly the equivalent of the GRP contributions of full-service restaurants, residential property managers, and hotels combined. So making headway in this area could really make a difference for our community. I understand the report's going to be emailed to each of you tomorrow, so read it and let us know if you have any questions at all. The study really makes a strong case that childcare benefits not only children and families, but our community and, of course, our local economy as a whole. So if you want to know more about the We Are the Care initiative, please contact First Five of San Luis Obispo County, or you can go to www.first5slow.org. Thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Shayna. And AGP, if we could promote Principal Michael Wood of Del Mar.
Yeah.
I believe.
Mayor, he was already promoted, and I'm just asking him to unmute. And Principal Michael Wood, you are live.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Heading and council members and community members. I really appreciate having an opportunity to speak tonight and introduce myself as the new principal of Del Mar Elementary School. And I'm so thrilled to be a part of this community. And so I wanted to share a few things with you. Mayor and council members. First of all, our students are so happy to be back in school together and to be talking and connecting and learning, and their hearts are literally bursting with joy. And I'll be honest with you, they don't know how to put words to that feeling, and they have no idea what to do with the energy that it produces inside of them. I had reached out to families and told families that in the first few weeks, I had seen students actually in class holding onto their desks with both hands up on their knees on their exercise balls, chairs, and planking while they were on task at the same time having group discussion. But seriously, planking? And as I reached out to families, and talked with parents, they are experiencing a similar increase in energy at home as well. And so I wanted to just publicly thank our families and our parent community for really working hard just to foster that joy of coming back to school for children. And I also wanted to just, Mayor, bring to your attention that, there is significant need in our community, and the outpouring really of just generosity from various organizations like Kiwanis and Rita's Rainbow to fill our shoe closet for students. The outpouring was literally overwhelming. We filled that shoe closet from top to bottom, and the shoes spilled out across the floor of that closet in an array of sizes. We had the startup of our Got Your Back program this last week, sponsored by the Estero Bay Kindness Coalition. And every Friday they bring those backpacks, and they come back Monday, and families are so deeply appreciative. And lastly, I wanted to thank Councilmember Addis and Councilmember Ford for coming out to Walk to School week. It was an extraordinary event, and I'll leave you with this humorous moment. As we were approaching the school and kids were lining up by the crosswalk, there was a young student that was there and waiting for the crossing guard to motion them across. And he raised both fists up to the sky as she gave the go signal and just yelled out, "This is Sparta," as he walked across the crosswalk to school. And the mom standing next to me said, "That's my kid." So thank you so much, Mayor Heading. It's been a wonderful, wonderful start to the year, and I deeply appreciate our Morro Bay community.
Principal Wood, thank you for being here this evening, and welcome to our community. I know you have some big shoes to fill with Principal Gould moving to the district, but it looks to me like that's not going to be difficult for you. May I have an invitation to come to your school appropriately masked to do some planking with the kids?
You are more than welcome. Reach out please to Stephanie Velt in the front office, and she will set up a time for me to walk you around during the day. Absolutely. Please come by.
I love it. I need some of that energy. Thank you again, Michael, for being here.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Anthony, next public comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to bring up Mike Taylor one more time.
Okay.
Mike, are you there? I'm not seeing any action on him, so at this point, I'm going to bring up Betty Windholtz.
Okay.
Her hand raised.
Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. This is Betty Windholtz. I just want to refer to. Let me backtrack. This is not consent. This is public comment.
That is correct, Betty. Yes.
That's right. Okay. Thank you. I will save my comment for the next section.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Anthony, next public comment, please.
All right. Mayor, I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and close public comment and get my camera going here. Thank Councilmember Ford and Addis for walking to school and being involved there. Appreciate that very much. And thank you, Councilmember Addis, for being our liaison to We Are the Care initiative and supporting that great program. With that does bring us to our consent agenda this evening. This is item A, consent agenda. Public comment is now open for items A1 through A7, our consent agenda. And so, Anthony, I'll go ahead and open up public comment on consent.
Thank you, Mayor. I see Betty Windholtz with her hand raised.
And welcome back, Betty.
You should be unmuted.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
No worries.
I just want to ask the question on A6, where I was wondering why the city is using Long Beach CPI for the lease agreement on A6 rather than the San Francisco CPI, which is what you use for our fees, and why the distinction?
Okay. Thank you, Betty. Anthony, next public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
All right, I'll go ahead and close public comment on the consent agenda. And I do believe we have one council member that will need to be recused from item number A-6. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor.
I will pull A6 for two reasons. One, to ask staff to address Betty's question. And then Councilmember Ford, when we get to A6, I'm going to do the others first. And then we'll demote you and then bring you back after we're done with that. Okay?
Sounds good.
So good. So I will ask, I'm going to pull A6. Are there any other items to pull first of all? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
I'll move to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Addis to approve A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Second by Councilmember Heller. Any further discussion? Hearing
I do have a comment, Mayor.
Yes, please go ahead.
I do have a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff again for their work on the monument. I know I remember those emails coming through and feeling dismayed by what was happening with the monument for the first Filipino community, and was so happy to see how quickly staff was able to move on that. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you and echo the comments that were already stated.
Thanks, Councilmember Addis, and I will echo that too. I meant to say that earlier, but I know that the response was immediate and swift and very satisfactory, so thank you, staff, for that. So we do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on those items? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes. Now we'll go ahead and thank you. We'll go ahead and demote, Councilmember Ford. We're going to demote you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could,
yes.
I would suggest that Councilmember Ford disclose the potential conflict of interest before she's demoted.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Councilmember Ford, please.
Thank you, Attorney Newmeyer, for reminding me to do that. My personal business leases the property next door to Ciano Realty. So I am recusing myself from item A6 to avoid any potential conflict of interest.
Thank you for disclosing that. And with that, we will unfortunately demote you for the moment. And Heather, let me know when we're good to go. Heather, are we good to go?
I think we got her done. I think we got it. Thank you.
Thank you. For A6, could somebody address on staff why the Long Beach CPI was used versus the San Francisco CPI? Maybe Mr.
Yes, thanks for heading. The timing of the lease amendment for 781 Market for Ciano Real Estate kind of came up in and around the time we released the rent increase for mobile home parks, and that was the most recent document that I'd seen from the city, and it used the Southern California CPI as the increase number. So I used that for both the Ciano Real Estate lease amendment and the lease amendment for Rock Harbor Market. So it was that simple.
All right, thank you for that. And is there any further discussion on A6? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I have a couple of things. I have a question here.
Yes.
I remembered how to raise my hand.
Perhaps if raise our hands and then I can see you folks. Thank you so much. Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Heller.
So I guess I'd like a little more explanation. Let me back up here. First of all, I'd like to thank Betty Winholtz for her comments. I don't know of anyone else in the city who reads the entire staff report. It looks to me from some of her other comments on other items that she actually does that. So whether or not we always agree with Betty is one thing, but the fact that she reads it, I think, is highly commendable. And Betty, I want to thank you for doing that just about every meeting. It's quite remarkable. My question for this item is, do we have, which of these two CPI indexes are we going to apply in general going forward? Should we apply it to everything in the city, or it is a legitimate question. I don't quite understand why we're using different indexes for different things.
Yeah, it's a good question, Councilmember Heller. And, I think there's rationale for it. But I think we lost some of the institutional knowledge when Jen Calloway left the city. So I think we're going to have to do a little bit of research. I think there's good rationale because this question's come up before a couple of years ago. Scott, unless you have something else to go on, but I think there was good reasons why some we utilized Northern California and why we use Southern.
They have changed over time. We've gone back and forth between the two areas related to CPI. We most recently did it, as was noted by Ms. Winholtz, for the fee update. And the last, it was as simple as for the Ciano lease amendment, that the last document that I saw that the city had done was we released in September, was for the mobile home rent increase. And so I used that same CPI. I could have used the one, I guess, for the Bay Area. There was no specific direction. I think, that we were supposed to use one or the other. For this specific item, we just tied it for the increase to their rent.
Okay, well, maybe going forward we can figure out, and I don't know how different they even are, to tell you the truth, but I think it's a good question. The other question I have about this, obviously it's a below market rent situation because I think the folks who lease this space are planning on being there a short time and they spent quite a bit of money on improvements. And I think the assumption underlying it is valid, that we're hopefully going to develop that site within a few years. But do we have a plan or an idea what we do if, say, 5 years from now it still hasn't developed, or 10 years it hasn't developed? Is there some way, or is there something in the lease that will allow us to charge more of a market rate rent for this and the adjacent space as well?
It's a good question, Councilmember Heller. As you're aware, we're actively working on marketing that property for redevelopment. And it's like, so your assumption and the question you asked is based on if that doesn't happen, what can we do? This lease term is for 3 years. We have a 60-day notice where we can get out of it if we do enter into a purchase and sale agreement with an entity to redevelop the property. Otherwise, it runs for 3 years, at which point we could reevaluate it if the decision was made by the city council, say, not to redevelop the property. Then we would be pursuing market rate rents for those spaces that are in the building. But given that we are doing it on a short-term basis and they know that we can literally give them 60 days notice, cancel it, enter into a purchase and sale agreement and for redevelopment. So that's why it's a reduced rent and for the amount of money that they put into it.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. What else? One more last, if I may go backwards a little bit on topic. I'd like to thank Scott Collins as well for his prompt response to the monument, which frankly I didn't even know was there. And until I was reading recently about Morro Bay's history, I didn't realize that the Filipino community was such an early resident of the area. So thank you, Scott, for that. And I'd also like to thank Greg Wallach for the Coleman Park workshop, I guess, that he has put together, which I think is a great idea. It's a very hot area, and I think it's Greg who initiated that. And I want to thank you for that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. I do believe, just to add on A6 with regard to the CPI issue, maybe we could have staff evaluate. I do believe we have a policy that's set. I don't know if it applies across the board to all increases, but we have in the past, I believe, but perhaps we could review that and maybe bring that back just as a report. Thank you for that. With that, I'll go ahead and move approval of A6.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Heading to approve item A6, second by Councilmember Addis. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis? Yes. Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes. And thank you. Let's go ahead and bring back Councilmember Ford. And I'll wait a minute till we get her in and we'll move it forward.
All right, Mayor, I've moved Jen Ford back over and she's back on the panelists.
Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate that very much. That brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to item V-1. This is a public hearing. The process for public hearing, we will have the staff presentation followed by council questions and answers. Then after that, I will open up the public hearing, open up public comment on this item. After public comment, I'll close public comment, close the public hearing, and then either entertain a motion or further council discussion and action. And so this is, again, item B-1, our public hearing item for this evening. This is to adopt resolutions approving the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan Appendix G. And I believe I'm turning it over to Mr. Wallach. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have our consultants, WSC, that will provide a presentation on this item. If we could promote Daniel, Justin, Spencer, and or Melissa.
All right.
Okay, I see Spencer.
And Daniel Hamel should be coming over as well.
I see Daniel.
And let me
okay, excellent. Daniel, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Mayor Heading, members of the council, we appreciate the opportunity to present to you today the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan for the City of Morro Bay. This is a particularly exciting moment for me. I actually grew up in Morro Bay and have had the opportunity to work on Central Coast water resource issues for the good part of my career, but this is the first opportunity I've had to work specifically on a project for the City of Morro Bay. So it's a bit of a homecoming for me. If we go to the next slide, our agenda today is to cover the core elements of the Urban Water Management Plan, or as we'll refer to as a UWMP. And those core elements include the background, water use, water supply, water reliability, demand management measures, and the water shortage contingency plan. And we'll go into each of those elements in more detail in the presentation. If we go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, back one, my bad. First off, we'll start with a bit of background on the urban water management plans. So urban water management plans are required by the California Water Code, and they're required to be updated every 5 years. And the California Department of Water Resources develops guidance for how to meet that water code. The intent of the urban water management plans is to support near-term and long-term planning for supply, demand, drought, and other potential water shortages. And this planning process is prepared in coordination with the city, and builds on other prior planning efforts, including the city's One Water Plan and Plan Morro Bay plans. The primary goal of the UWMP is to ensure that projected demands for the next 25 years are met by the available supply. One of the new requirements of the UWMP in this cycle is the adoption of a water shortage contingency plan as a separate or standalone document to the urban water management plan. The intent of separating the water shortage contingency plan from the urban water management plan is to allow flexibility to amend these plans separately if needed. The water shortage contingency plan is a plan that provides a framework for how the city would deal with short-term or long-term drought-related water shortages and the associated responses. And then lastly, urban water management plans are a prerequisite for certain loans and grants. And then finally, this one, I stole this from a fellow consultant that we work with, Medal's Consultants, but the urban water management plan is really, it's an opportunity for a water utility to tell your water story. What does your current water supply portfolio look like? What does your future water supply portfolio look like? What are your current demands and what are your future demands anticipated to be? And how are you planning to meet those potential future demands or upcoming drought conditions? So the core elements of the urban water management plan, the water shortage contingency plan, are shown in this table. The first 3 chapters give the background and the setting of the city and the urban water management plan process. Then the urban water management plan describes water use and water supply for the city in an effort to inform water service reliability and the drought risk assessment, which looks and helps identify potential long or short-term water shortages. These in turn then inform the description of the long-term conservation measures known as demand management measures, as well as the short-term measures included in the water shortage contingency plan. The Senate Bill X7-7 chapter also explains the city's compliance with the per capita water use standards established in the 2010 and 2015 urban water management plans, which the city has achieved. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Spencer Waterman to discuss the population and demand projections sections of our presentation.
Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Before we dive into the population and the demands, I kind of want to just go over some ground rules here, units that we're using. So the key units that we use are acre feet per year, or AFY for short. And we also use gallons per capita per day, or GPCD for short. So as we're showing here on this slide, an acre foot of water is about the same as a football field flooded with a foot of water. And this unit's usually used for larger scale water resources planning. In order to conceptualize water use on a smaller scale, we use GPCD, which represents total city water use divided by population. This represents a person's share of the community's daily water needs, including non-residential uses. All right, so speaking of population, this chart here shows historical census population from 2010 and 2020. And then it also shows projected population in alignment with the general plan and the One Water Morro Bay plan projections, which are below the city's growth management ordinance Measure F cap of 12,200 residents. These population estimates are used to help us project demands, which I'll discuss in the next couple of slides. As shown in the pie chart on the left-hand side here, the majority of demands in 2020 were residential with some other non-residential uses as well. And these percentages of usage shown in the pie chart are customer classes and the percentages that we expect to remain about the same through 2045 as shown in the top right table. And I'll explain how the future total demands through 2045 in that table were projected in the next slide. The table on the bottom right shows the city's 2020 use of 90 GPCD, which is far less than DWR's SPX 7-7 2020 water use target of 116 GPCD. This reflects the city's sustained efficient water use even after the end of the last multi-year drought from 2012 to 2016. So kudos to the city and the city's customers for maintaining that efficient water use. All right, so the UWMP is used as a water supply planning tool that shows how the city can provide supply to meet the potential growth identified in the general plan, which is the basis for growth management. Therefore, the populations from 2 slides ago were used to develop demand projections using a gallons per capita per day method, as I mentioned, GPCD. The GPCD method represents total city water use, including non-residential and residential uses attributed to the total residential population. So therefore, if population grows, it's assumed that residential and non-residential water use will change at the same rate. The GPCD method is a high-level demand projection method, and it's based on using the general plan's projected population, and it does not consider individual development projects. The chart on the right shows potential demand from 2025 through 2045, when the previous populations that I showed are applied to 3 GPCD scenarios shown in the chart on the left. A high usage demand projection is shown with the orange lines. Medium projection is shown in blue, and a low projection is shown in purple. The recommended demand projection for this UWMP is shown as the medium scenario in blue, and that matches the projections from the One Water Morro Bay plan, as well as the population from the general plan. This projection assumes usage of 106 GPCD based on the average usage patterns that were experienced from the years 2010 through 2014. And therefore, it assumes that there will be a future rebound to a higher usage pattern, similar to what we saw before the last long-term multi-year drought. And we would anticipate that rebound would happen by 2025. That time period of 2010 through 2014 does include a lower usage year in 2014, which helps to account for permanent conservation savings, such as grass removal and plumbing or appliance retrofits and upgrades. Just to kind of make that more relatable for reference, 106 GPCD translates to an average residential customer using about 2 units of water per month. And 2 units, for those who don't know, is about equal to 200 cubic feet per month. And the city's lowest tier 1 rate class allows for usage of up to 3 units per month. Using 106 GPCD is consistent with DWR's UWMP guidebook, and they recommend to consider what's called an unconstrained demand as the expected water use pattern. Unconstrained demand represents water use without drought conditions or any factors that may suppress demand in the short term. As described in the 1 Morro Bay plan, 106 GPCD is a conservative assumption because the purpose of the plan is to size infrastructure needs for the distribution system. Therefore, it's appropriate to include a level of conservatism when planning for future transmission, distribution, and storage needs. However, demands could be potentially higher or lower than shown in the One Water Morro Bay plan. So we offered those other options to kind of see what the bookends are there. So if permanent conservation savings and suppressed demand due to drought and the Great Recession were to go away, demands could return to a higher unconstrained usage pattern of about 116 GPCD. And that's similar to what the usage was back in 2006. This higher unconstrained demand is shown in orange. On the other hand, one could expect that per capita usage may not rebound and it may reduce in the future. For example, per capita water use could reduce to achieve future water use efficiency standards that are set by the state. The purple line shows a low usage scenario for this, estimating potential demands considering state water use efficiency standards, which are still under development. And in recognition that water demand could be potentially lower than the existing demand in a scenario like this, the city plans to continue implementing its water use efficiency measures and encouraging reductions in water use to enhance resiliency for drought and for other water shortage conditions. As I mentioned previously, it's important to note that the UWMP is used as a water supply planning tool, and it shows how the city can provide supply to meet the potential growth identified in the general plan. Therefore, the somewhat conservative demand projections from the One Water Morro Bay plan are recommended for supply planning purposes in the UWMP. And with that, I'll turn it over back to Dan to discuss supply projections to meet these demands.
Thanks, Spencer. So yeah, as Spencer mentioned, we're now transitioning from the demand portion of the presentation to the supply portion, or how much water does the city have available under various scenarios. And so this is a table from the Urban Water Management Plan that shows the anticipated reasonably available volume of water that the city would anticipate having under current and or future conditions. And so I interpret this as the amount of water the city would anticipate having available under average hydrologic or rainfall conditions. And so it's broken down into the two primary sources of supply for the city. The first row represents the reasonably available volume of state water. And the assumptions for this are based on the anticipated long-term average annual allocations of state water from the Department of Water Resources 2019 Delivery Capacity Report for the State Water Project, which DWR, or Department of Water Resources, projects a long-term average future availability of state water of 58% on an annual allocation. So therefore, when you factor in the city's state water service allocation of 1,313 acre feet per year, along with its 2,290 acre feet per year of drought buffer, the city has assumed that on an average year condition that it would have access to its full 1,313 acre feet per year water service allocation, and that's shown in the first row. The second row characterizes anticipated current and future groundwater availability. And for groundwater supply, the city has the right to pump 581 acre feet from the Morro Valley Basin. However, as a conservative assumption, the groundwater supply estimated to be available to the city was assumed to be 407 acre feet per year to account for the recovery efficiencies or the losses associated with treating that water through the city's reverse osmosis nitrate treatment facility. And then additionally shown in this table in the first column is the actual production of those two sources of supply in 2020 for reference. And so if we move to the next slide, which you did, thank you. Additionally, DWR requires water utilities to characterize and evaluate their anticipated supply availability, not just on average years, but on other water year types. And so this table provides information on the anticipated availability of the city's water supplies for an average a single dry, and a consecutive dry year period. And we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about the consecutive dry year period, 5-year dry year period on the next couple of slides. Again, the average year availability is the same as we saw on the previous slide, but the single dry year is quite a bit different story. So the single dry year assessment is based off the amount of available water supply from 2014, when the State Water Project had a 5% annual allocation. And you can see it's a much significantly reduced amount of state water available in a single dry year for the state water supply. The groundwater supply remains the same as we showed on the previous slide. And then for the 5-year consecutive drought period, we selected the period from 2012 to 2016, as this represents the lowest 5-year average of State Water Project annual allocations on record. And as the council may remember, that included a year in 2014 where there was, only a 5% annual allocation. This 5-year consecutive drought period was selected for the city because this is a period, again, when state water allocations were the lowest that we've ever seen on a 5-year average, and because the city's primary source of supply is state water. And so we wanted to focus on a period when state water was going to be the most compromised. And so on the next slide, we're going to compare the anticipated amount of available supply, as we show you here, with the anticipated demands that Spencer presented earlier. So as I mentioned, on this side, we bring in the supply-demand analysis together to show how the city anticipates meeting its water demands over a 5-year consecutive dry period under current conditions. And by current conditions, I mean current demands, as well as currently, generally current demands as we assume them for the city, and currently available sources of supply. So in this graph, the stacked columns represent the amount of supply available, and it breaks it into the different supply sources. Gray is state water, yellow is stored state water, and then blue is groundwater for each year of the 5-year drought period. And the solid black line represents the anticipated demand for that year. And you'll see demand is slowly increasing over the 5-year period as previously projected. And as previously stated, this analysis simulates the anticipated amount of supply over the period from 2012 to 2016, the driest 5-year period on record. And under these conditions, the city anticipates being able to meet its demands through a combination of utilizing its state water supplies, its stored state water supplies, its Morro Valley groundwater supplies, and conservation. Similarly to how it weathered the 2012 to 2016 drought period. One of the takeaways from this graph, as you'll see, is that in all years, the supply columns exceed the demand. And this is an indication that the city has a robust supply to weather a drought period of this type. And as you can see, in the first 2 years, the city is able to rely upon its annual allocation of state water to meet its demand and not utilize its stored state water. However, in the 3rd and 4th years, with reduced state water allocations, the city is required or needs to rely on its stored state water to meet its demands, but still has its groundwater supply available as a backup or emergency supply. The other thing to note on this slide is no IPR water is assumed to be available, as this is intended to represent near-term supply conditions, and the IPR project is not currently permitted. If we go to the next slide, thank you. So this next slide looks at future conditions. So this graph shows how the city anticipates meeting its water demands for a similar 5-year consecutive drought period, but under future or 2045 conditions. And again, the stacked columns represent the amount of supply available each year for the 5-year consecutive dry period. The solid black line represents anticipated future demands. But it's important to note that on this graph, the demands are higher than the demands on the previous graph because of the anticipated increase in demands associated with increased population in the future. And one of the key takeaways from this graph is, so for this future drought scenario, the city would need additional water beyond its water service amount of 1,313 acre feet per year of state water to meet its annual demands, and anticipates utilizing more of its groundwater supply. Additionally, of note, during the 4th year of drought in this future supply scenario, it is anticipated that the IPR project would need to be activated to meet the demands because of the limited availability of state or stored state water during that year. What is not shown on this graph is also, however, the option for the city to use the other tool in its tool chest to ensure that it can match its supply and demand, and that's conservation. And so through implementation of higher levels of its water conservation program, the other option would be to reduce the demands in these drought scenarios to a lower supply amount. And with that, I'll pass it back to Spencer to talk about those options to reduce demands in the water shortage contingency plan.
Thanks, Dan. So as Dan mentioned at the beginning, one of the biggest changes to UWMP requirements since the last plan in 2015 includes new requirements for the water shortage contingency plan. I'll call it the WSCP for short. So the WSCP is used to provide guidance to identify anticipated shortages and response actions to manage a water shortage. The WSCP is a detailed proposal for how the city intends to act in the case of an actual water shortage condition. Water shortages can be triggered by hydrological limitations, supply and treatment infrastructure issues, compliance with state mandates, catastrophic interruptions from natural disasters, or any combination of those conditions or other unforeseen conditions. The WSCP is a separate document from the UWMP, and it can be amended separately if needed in case any of these unforeseen issues arise unexpectedly. Lastly, the WSCP also addresses a new requirement to develop a documented process for annual assessments of potential shortage starting in July 2022. Another one of the new WSCP requirements is to show 6 standard stages or equivalent stages of percentage of shortage. And so this slide here shows a crosswalk of the city's shortage stages on the left over to DWR's recommended stages over on the right-hand side. Evaluation criteria that can be used to determine and declare the severity of supply shortage could include a host of criteria, including but not limited to historic rainfall, infrastructure capabilities and plausible constraints, customer demands, state water project allocations or stored state water availability, state mandates like we had in the last drought with mandatory reductions in demand, or other locally applicable criteria as necessary. Each of these stages has related shortage response actions that can be used to address a shortage. And shortage response actions can include supply augmentation, operational changes, or demand reductions. An example of supply augmentation would be to use IPR to supplement groundwater, as shown a few slides ago. Some key examples of demand reductions for shortage response actions for each of the city stages are shown on this slide here. When a shortage stage is declared by the city, these actions and or potential other actions can be enacted to encourage water use reductions. Another new WSCP requirement includes estimating potential water use reductions from these shortage response actions. Required water use reductions estimates are shown in this table here for shortage response actions. And the estimated savings is shown as the required savings columns. The amount of water savings expected from actions can be quantified for some, such as irrigation days and times, which we can estimate how much savings could be achieved with those. But some actions can't be quantified. For example, like bolstering public outreach and education. It can definitely impact water use reductions. However, it's hard to quantify that in this table. The city anticipates being able to meet required savings if it's quantifiable by using its quantifiable and unquantifiable response actions for each stage. In addition to how the city will deal with short-term shortages, demand management measures identify long-term strategies to manage demand. So those demand management measures are summarized here in this table. As we mentioned earlier, water use efficiency will continue to be a valuable resource management strategy for the city. The various programs that have been successful for water use efficiency are summarized here and in the demand management measures chapter of the UWMP. The district anticipates continuing to implement these successful programs to manage demand. So in summary, the key takeaways from the UWMP are that the city supply is expected to meet demands through 2045. In the event that there are short-term shortages due to kind of unforeseen conditions, the city's updated water shortage contingency plan provides a roadmap for anticipating and responding to them. The city has achieved the required conservation target from SBX 7-7 and is well positioned to continue meeting forthcoming water use efficiency targets from the state. Lastly, the UWMP is anticipated to meet all of DWR, or Department of Water Resources, requirements and maintain funding eligibility and grant eligibility. Comments from the City Council, City staff, and public will be addressed in a forthcoming final UWMP if the Council chooses to conditionally adopt the UWMP based on those changes. I'd like to thank the City Council members and staff for all your valuable input throughout the process so far. And I'd like to discuss any questions you may have on the draft UWMP and WSCP. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Daniel. Very much appreciated. Thank you for the comprehensive overview. The staff report articulated it well, and I think your slide presentation was a good comprehensive overview and really tells the story well. So thank you for that. At this point, I want to open it up to any council member questions that they may have, council members of either Daniel or Spencer and or Greg. So I see Councilmember Heller's hand raised. Councilmember Heller, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank both of you for your presentation. It was very thorough. I'd like to thank Greg Kwolek for answering a few of my questions very late in the day today. I'm curious, the 106 gallons per day per person, how does that compare to other cities in the region?
Yeah, well, statewide, it's much lower than a lot of the other places, but I'd say kind of for the Central Coast, it's about on par. There are some agencies that are a bit lower. However, they're in more drastic supply situations. So they've had to conserve just because they don't have supply as an option. But yeah, I would say you're right there in the group of efficient users.
Okay, thank you for that. The 5-year scenario, as I understand it, now that you've explained it, what it's based on. Does your model take into account a possible 10-year severe drought or longer range in the future?
The model that's included in the urban water management plan only accounts for a 5-year drought, but it does account for the driest 5-year period on record. I think one of the things and one of the benefits of the city's supply is the ability to kind of refill its bank of stored water, and so ideally over, we see it even in a 5-year period, but over a 10-year period, you would see obviously a series of dry years, but also interspersed with wet years that allow the city to generate a stored water supply that I would anticipate would allow the city to weather an extended drought, at least based off of, rainfall patterns that we've seen historically.
Okay, and the 5-year period, is that something that's required by the regulatory agency?
It is, yes.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Appreciate that. Other council member questions? Looking for a hand. I don't see one. A couple of questions on my part. It's apparent, at least in your closing comments, that it appears like that our supply is expected to meet the projected demands through 2045 if we continue our patterns as we have in the past. And you bring very little IPR, reclaimed water use into the scenario. So would you consider that to be in the future, given what you've looked at with regard to the potential capacity of production by our new plant, for that to be a significant cushion for the city in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think having that supply and a drought resilient supply available is a huge benefit for the city. I think that the analysis showed that through the use of IPR and based on historical droughts, and the city can weather these extended drought periods without having to implement, extreme conservation measures. And a large part of that was because of the ability in that 4th year to, or projected to use that IPR system to bolster the groundwater supply. So it is, and it's the value of having a diversified water supply portfolio and a conjunctive use strategy, really relying upon surface water when it's available, storing that in the state water system for future dry years. And then even when that's not available, being able to access a local groundwater supply, and specifically a groundwater supply that can be bolstered through an IPR project is an effective strategy.
Good. In your presentation, page 15, you talk about shortage response actions or potential policy considerations the council could entertain. Are these your proprietary recommendations, or is this something that currently exists or compares to what we have?
Yeah, what we're showing here is currently in the city's municipal code.
Okay, I just wanted to double check that. And so that's section 1304-330 and 1304-340. We could find that, correct? And there have been no changes made, or are there any new recommendations coming out that potentially, I guess what I'm asking is it time to take a look at this and potentially update it?
That's a good question, especially this year.
Yeah, really.
The city has a pretty comprehensive list of actions that you can take, and we didn't really find any bang for your buck measures that aren't on the list for you all already. That's not to say that there aren't any out there. There for sure are. And if there comes that time where you need to consider changing the water shortage stage, they can definitely consider it at that time. And that'll be part of something I mentioned called the annual assessment, which will be required annually starting July 2022. And so that'd be a good time to, take stock of what programs are being implemented and identify if there's any potential new opportunities to implement.
Good, appreciate that. And maybe this is a tangential question, but any idea when DPR regs may even ever be considered in the state of California? From your perspective, guys, I'm just thinking out loud of another source.
Yeah, I mean, so there's currently a timeline that the State Water Resources has for putting out DWR regs. I want to say that timeline is 2023. And so, they're on the horizon. However, based on our experience with, potable reuse regulations and specifically what we're hearing in the industry around DPR is largely there's going to be a high bar that you're going to have to meet for DPR when you compare it to IPR, indirect potable reuse. And so generally the thought is it's probably going to be available for really large utilities, to be able to meet that high bar before, making its way to, smaller utilities like we have here on the Central Coast. But it's coming, the regs will be there, and it'll be an opportunity moving forward.
Good, and thanks for that. My last question is, from your perspective, will there be an opportunity for cities that have excess supply to be able to sell this commodity in the future?
Yes, there's been some exciting developments, primarily with the state water system and the water management tools amendment that many of the state water contractors have recently adopted. It's a game changer for being able to sell, transfer, exchange state water really throughout, either here locally or throughout the state. It removes a lot of the previously included restrictions that the earlier versions of the contract had, and it will definitely create new opportunities.
Great, thank you guys. That's all the questions I have. Other council member questions? Seeing no hands raised. Thank you, gentlemen. Stick around. We're going to go to the public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. And go ahead and take your screen down if you would. Appreciate that. I'll open up the public hearing. And Anthony, go ahead and open up public comment. And if there's any public comment, let's go ahead and bring it forward. This is public comment for item B-1 in our agenda this evening. Public comment is now open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I see Mike Taylor has unmuted. Mike, you are free to speak.
Welcome, Mike.
Oh, my question was relative to the presentation we just heard.
Okay. We have finished that item, sir. I apologize.
It was finished without public comment?
No, public comment was opened a couple of times. Somehow you couldn't get in, and we weren't able to bring you into the panel.
That's quite all right.
Do you have a quick question, Mike? I'm happy to, I'll make an exception.
Well, the presentation included the reference to stored state water.
That's this presentation. You're in the right place.
Oh, so my question is, the stored state water, where is it stored?
Okay, so noted. We'll get a response for you. If you'll just hang on, okay? I got it. Anthony, next public comment.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I see Betty Winholtz with her hand raised. Okay,
welcome, Betty.
You are unmuted.
Thank you. This is Betty Winholtz again. I just want to bounce off of one of the questions I raised in my email, and that is in regarding to finding or noticing the public on what is required of them at this time or what they can be doing. And it was difficult for me to find water or information about the water conservation on the city website. Just typing in words like you would on Google, it's almost like you have to have the exact address or it won't come up. So I don't know if there's something there that can be changed in how that search engine works for the city. Also, it was noted that notice had gone out in the water bills, and I myself as a renter, and I know other people are renters in town, we don't pay our water bill. Our landlords pay our water bill. So we had no notice of changing from stage 2 to stage 3. So I would appreciate if the city could figure out how to notice us as well so we can participate as we should in the water savings. the idea that we are in stage 3, and stage 3, as you saw up on the board a minute ago, says that there shall be no dust control. And I'm wondering if that's why the WRF is not using dust control out at the site, particularly with the strong winds we've had the last 5 days. And my concern then is for the sensitive receptor next to the WRF site, which is the Casa de Flores. And so I don't know if there's an exception that the city needs to make, or if you think it's a sufficient risk not to use the way to dust down the water or use water to dust down all the what's being blown around out there. And if that was a consideration, if you could talk about that, I'd appreciate it. And then my last question is about the IPR for that 1 year where it gets so low. It seems to me if we rely on the IPR too much, then we're actually begging for saltwater intrusion at that point. And so if you could address that. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Anthony, next public comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to council. I will close the public hearing. And let's just, maybe I could have one or either Daniel or Spencer address regarding state water. Where is it stored? We had one of our callers ask. Or maybe staff.
I can address that quickly if that's helpful. Yeah, so stored state water is stored in San Luis Reservoir. So if you're driving east off Highway 152 from Gilroy, headed out towards the San Joaquin Valley, you'll drive right by it. And it's an off-stream reservoir south of the Delta.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And then with regard to a few of the questions that Betty was asking, Greg, do you want to just respond? I know you did in the email, and I appreciate that, about noticing the public on opportunities for conservation. She was referring to the water bill notices and the difficulty accessing information on our website. Do you have any thoughts about that or fixes for those concerns?
Yeah, it's something I could look into. I think Ms. Winholtz raises a good point that renters aren't necessarily receiving the water bills. So that's something we can look at. As far as our website, if someone Googles water conservation Morro Bay, as I just did, it's the first thing that comes up. That may not be the same for every person, so I'm not sure, but I can certainly look into that with my staff and see if we can come up with some better ideas.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then Ms. Winholtz had a question about us being in stage 3 now. I'm not sure, but are we not using water for dust control at present because of the stage 3 situation? And what she was referring to was a concern for the long-term care facility next door and issues regarding those patients.
Sure. That is something that I can look into. I know that earlier on in the project, the contractor was using non-potable water for dust control. And so I'm not sure when Ms. Winholtz saw that, but that's something I can inquire on.
Okay, great. Yeah, especially the last couple of days with the high wind conditions that we've had. Appreciate hearing back from you on that. And then perhaps Daniel or Spencer or Greg or Rob might be able to comment on, IPR and saltwater intrusion and concerns about that. Any comments from our experts in the audience?
I guess I would add, Rob can probably speak more specifically to, conditions in the Morro Basin, but, a traditional, I think I described earlier, conjunctive use strategy is, you rely on the surface water when it's available and you have it, and that allows you to rest your groundwater supplies so that they are available when you need them. And so that's an effective strategy that's utilized by water utilities throughout the state to weather these extended drought periods.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Anything to add, Rob?
Sure. As far as seawater intrusion goes in coastal groundwater basins, it is an issue that has to be dealt with. Overpumping of these coastal aquifers does cause a basically a downward gradient so that the seawater can intrude into the basin. By adding additional water to that basin through the IPR project will basically increase the level or the head pressure so that it exceeds the level of the ocean water and prevent seawater intrusion.
Thank you, Rob.
I'll just add, Mayor, that at this point, while I don't disagree with what the city engineer just said, that we haven't tested this yet because the infrastructure is not in place. So I would just caution on that.
Thank you.
I was speaking in general as far as we don't know the exact amounts, but in general, when you increase the level in your groundwater basin, cause an increase in head pressure that prevents groundwater intrusion.
Okay, thank you. Good responses. Appreciate that. And I think that takes care of the questions from public comment. With that, I will go ahead and move adoption of resolution number 6621, approving the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and authorizing its submittal to the Department of Water Resources, and adoption of resolution number 67-21, approving the 2020 Water Shortage Contingency Plan and authorizing its submittal to the Department of Water Resources, and third, adopting resolution number 68-21, approving the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan Appendix G, reduced reliance on the Delta, and authorizing its submittal to the Department of Water Resources.
I'll second all that.
I'll second.
We got a couple of seconds here. Motion by Mayor Henning for the staff recommendation, seconded by Councilmember Heller. And thank you for that. And is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I just want to again thank very much Mr. Waterman and Mr. Heimel for your presentation, your good work. Thank you, staff, for everything that you've done to make this happen. We appreciate it. And I will call for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis? Yes. Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you so much. That concludes our public hearing for tonight and brings us to our first item of business. This is approval of amendment to contract with Codstone Resources for management for cultural resources monitoring for the water reclamation facility, lift station, and offsite pipelines construction project. Second, amendment to contract with Far Western Anthropological Research Group for data recovery excavations at site CASLO-16 for the WRF lift station and offsite pipelines construction project. And three, approval of change orders. Number one, to the contract with Anvil Builders for construction services for the water reclamation facility lift station and offsite pipelines. This is item C-1, our first business item, and I believe I am turning this over to Mr. Kwolek and perhaps our WRF program manager, Mr. Rohr. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, our program manager, Kyle Rohr, is not available tonight, but Paul Amico from Corolla will be providing the presentation on these change orders and amendments.
Okay, welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Mayor and council members and members of the Morro Bay community. I'm going to share my screen so I just have a very, very short presentation on the items, just 2 or 3 slides here so we could walk through them. The staff report did contain quite a bit of information on the justification for the amendments and also the change order, but thought it would be helpful just to run through these items and then look at a timeline of events that led to the Anvil change order, the big item on the Anvil change order, because all of these items are all related. So just give me 1 second to share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen okay? So
looking good, Paul, yes.
Great. I'm going to move myself out of the way here. So agenda item C1, as the mayor stated, includes 3 items: the Cogstone Amendment 1, the Far Western Amendment 6, and then the Anvil Builders Contract Change Order number 1. The original scope for Cogstone didn't anticipate the extent of monitoring currently being conducted. That was a result of just the timing of bringing Cogstone on and needing to have monitors in place. We had to make some assumptions about that scope of work before, unfortunately, the sequence of events. It was before we actually had a contractor on board. So we didn't really know exactly what their work program was going to be, how many crews they were going to run, how many simultaneous sites they were going to be excavating. And also there were, due to that timing, what ended up happening was once Anvil got on board, they elected to work in multiple places, and that was a result of the SHPO delay that we'll discuss here shortly. But and so that required more monitors to be coordinated simultaneously, and at times Cogstone has actually had to have different tribal monitors in different places, up to 7 places at a time. So that is largely what's driving this particular amendment. And then Far Western, as they've done their testing program and they've put together their testing reports, they've better defined and better mapped the cultural area we refer to as SLO 16 that's identified in the final environmental impact report. That particular cultural resource area was known, but the exact extent of that area and its depth was not well mapped through all the past studies that had done. So their testing program did map that area and has better defined its relationship to where the pipelines and the conveyance facilities are located. One thing that did result from that is a change and a redesign of the pipeline project to raise many of those pipelines out of that cultural area. But unfortunately, the pipe bridge footings still need to be located down into that deposit. And so this particular item, it includes a much more robust clearance program that will be conducted in order to respectfully clear that area and have all the necessary monitoring and coordination with the agencies and the tribes for when we're into that area. So then that brings us to Anvil Builders Contract Change Order number 1. This includes a number of different items, as was outlined in the staff report. The largest is the SHPO delay, obviously, and I'll touch on that here in more detail in the next couple slides. There's been design clarifications that were driven by the fact that the contractor had then come on board, and once, this is pretty typical for construction contracts, they ask for clarifications and the designers clarify things, and then the city responds and some enhancements had to be made. We've also run into some differing site conditions, and then due to the trenching through a known archaeological site, there was a delay. Anvil had several days where the production of their crews slowed considerably, which they incurred more cost. So the change order 1 is included in pages 176 and 177 of the staff report that provides the details and descriptions for that. If any of the council members want to dig into that, I actually have these 2 pages up in a different application, and we will go through those in detail. But for right now, I will hone in on the two large items, which are the SHPO delay and the 12-inch RO waterline relocation. What's useful, I think, for the SHPO delay is that in order to understand what happened, we put together this timeline, and I will say that this timeline will be posted on the water reclamation facility public site so that people can take a look at this. But essentially what happened is this shows on the top our design and construction activities that have starting back in approximately the 3rd quarter of 2019, and we show to the 4th quarter of 2021. And then on the bottom are the archaeological testing and monitoring plan development and those items that were those key activities that were performed in order to do this. So what this shows is a relationship between the development of the submittal, the different submittals for the pipelines, when the programmatic agreement from EPA and SHPO was signed, and we really then understood what some of those requirements were going to be in order to conduct a testing program to comply with that programmatic agreement. We had to conduct that once we had the 90% submittal in hand, which set the profile of the pipe and the location of the pipe in the street. So we couldn't have done this work successfully or really adequately defined this area without that 90% submittal. Would we have wanted to do this much differently? Yeah, but the reality is that the city's under a time schedule order, and we're doing things not in an ideal manner for that. But so the testing program revealed that we had some issues with Caltrans right away, and we had to continue to progress the project. We opened bids with Anvil on the 12th of August. Contractually, with the contract between the city and Anvil says that Anvil really only has to hold their bid for 60 days, but they were we worked with them closely and ended up issuing notice to proceed quite late after that. Unfortunately, due to SHPO requirements and specifically related to the slow 16 area and some communication between EPA and SHPO, EPA came back and said they were not comfortable moving forward with this. With the ground disturbing activities, and so we had to issue a stop work order. That stop work order was approximately 35 days of stop work, but the actual impact to construction operations was more than 35 days. They submitted a time impact analysis and a summary of their costs that they had incurred because Anvil already had people on the ground. They already had mobilized onto the site and were beginning to conduct work. They had contracts that they had written with suppliers and vendors. They had a lot of work in progress after receiving that notice to proceed that couldn't be stopped. So that's what that $443,000 is. That's what the actual cost. So the time impact analysis and the cost analysis that Anvil submitted, we worked for several months with them to analyze both our records and theirs in order to substantiate that claim. And that's what we ended up negotiating with Anvil Builders for that. So as you can see, we are currently working with EPA and SHPO to get the remainder of this site cleared so that we can move forward with the excavation of the bridge footings, the pipe bridge footings, and continue with Far Western's work. So the overall summary I would say about the SHPO delay and its relationship to the two contract amendments is that those two contract amendments stem directly from the work that has been done with both Far Western and Cogstone related specifically to the cultural and archaeological resources in Morro Bay. One last thing I will say is the water line relocation, which is also a big ticket item, is that what ended up happening with the water line relocation is that more of the water line, there was a portion of existing water line that was under in the plans was scheduled for relocation due to its conflict with what we call the joint trench, which are the force mains and the brine line. And it turned out that the as-built drawings had shown that incorrect. The city's as-built drawings had shown that incorrect. So there was much more of that water line that needed to be relocated. One thing that was interesting about this is when we went through the analysis of all of Anvil's actual costs, that this water line actually, if you applied their unit price that they bid to the amount of water line that was relocated, it was actually less. So we felt that was an appropriate cost considering the work that was performed and the actual work that was put in the ground. So with that, I know I breezed through that pretty fast. So I will stop sharing my screen and I can take any questions that you all might have.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let me just open it up for any council questions. Councilmember Heller, I do see that hand of yours. Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Paul, thank you for that report. Thank you for that report. These projects are obviously not easy. And to be frank, when you identify certain specific areas of the project, I really don't know what you're talking about. So I apologize for that. But the question I have is, obviously this has not gone well, to be frank, from what I can tell. I think you'd probably agree with me on that. How far into the project are we? Do we have additional issues that we're going to have to deal with SHPO and the archaeological work that has to be done? How much of the archaeological work has actually been done percentage-wise? Just can you give me a sense of where we are in the project with respect to these kinds of issues?
So I have to split the archaeological work sort of into two, right? The project, I think right now is approximately 40% complete. And so the monitoring work that Cogstone is doing, this includes both paleontological and archaeological cultural monitoring. So they have actual archaeologists on site that also to hat as a paleontological monitor. They also have, we also have representatives from the local tribes that are observing construction as well. So Cogstone is coordinating all of that work. We have three different tribes that are on the, that actually provide monitors to that. So when Anvil works, for instance, at one point, a few weeks back, they were working in seven different locations doing ground disturbing activities, and they have to have monitors on all of those. And so that's what that Cogstone work is. So it's directly tied to digging in native soil where they may encounter artifacts or other cultural resources. In terms of Far Western's work, they have completed the majority of their work related to the testing reports and the monitoring plan development, and they've submitted those documents to EPA. And then EPA, because the programmatic agreement is between EPA and SHPO, then EPA then works with SHPO. The city doesn't actually have a direct relationship with SHPO because the funding agreement is between EPA and the city. So where we currently stand with that is the testing report for what we call phase 2B, which phase 2 are the pipelines. That was split into two because of the sensitive issues around the Slow 16 area, which is Lila-Kaiser Park. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's Lila-Kaiser Park when the majority of those resources are located. And so this Far Western agreement is actually specifically related to the pipe bridge, which goes over Morro Creek between the along the bike path near Lila-Kaiser Park. So that Far Western work includes work for archaeologists to actually clear those two bridge abutments, because we're going to be digging down into that rich cultural deposit that's there that they've identified through their testing reports. And it will be extremely slow going. We will be having, Anvil will actually be doing the digging work for them, and they will have archaeologists and actually have tribal monitors there as well for that work.
So is this, excuse me, sorry. So is this dollar amount, this PCO that we're looking at, does it apply to the work you just described or work that has already been done?
For Anvil or for Far Western?
Well, for both of them. I'm looking at it as one piece. We're 40% into it. Does this cover all that work through that 40%, or does this cover additional work?
The Far Western work covers the additional work. The Anvil work for the redesign in the Caltrans right away along the highway ramp, and then the clearance work for the bridge abutments, that will be a future change order. We have not received a price from Anvil, which would be, honestly, would be a credit for raising that pipe because it's less digging, because that's what we're doing along Caltrans is we're going to raise the pipe out of that deposit. But the work for helping Anvil or helping Far Western clear those bridge abutments, that work will need to be negotiated because their scope included handling the dirt, but not at a very slow production rate. So we will order from Anvil for that work.
Well, my concern is I'm trying to figure out where we are in the project. If we're 40% complete, it sounds like this is not the end of surprises relative to this kind of work. I see here that in the staff report that the budget for these increases come from the project's conveyance facilities contingency budget. which will have about $653,000 left in it, assuming we approve all of these tonight. The contingency for the conveyance part of the project at your last quarterly report was $2.7 million, if I'm reading it correctly, and now we're down to $653,000. With the amount of work, with 60% of the work left to do, are we going to substantially have to increase the budget for this part of the project? And if so, how much do you think more we're going to need?
I don't know. I can't predict how much more we might need at this point. I mean, that would be difficult to do because we still have more of that work to do in terms of digging in the street and, that sort of thing. My understanding, and unfortunately you're catching me in a bit flat-footed on the budget questions because Kyle and Elaine are my colleagues. They handle the budget and they prepare the quarterly report.
That's all right. I don't expect you to remember all the numbers.
Right.
I just was looking at the quarterly report this afternoon and I saw that number. So it concerned me that there's not much left in the contingency in the report that, is not that old.
So, right. So yeah, I mean, we can certainly follow up within the context of the quarterly report. My understanding is there's also a program contingency budget that we may be, but again, I don't have that report right in front of me, so my apologies for that.
So in general, Paul, maybe you can just tell me and the council and the public in general, the kinds of issues that we're dealing with here, this is not the end of it. There'll be more issues like this apparently surrounding these issues. Is that fair to say?
Well, not for the archaeology. I mean, the whole point of the far western work and it being nearly complete. So the archaeological and cultural work that we're doing, we really shouldn't see many more surprises or things that we wouldn't, weren't adequately defined or weren't defined until late in the design process. So as I said, the cost for Anvil's work to help clear those pipe bridge, that we still need to negotiate that. There's give and take on that particular issue. The issues that we would expect to see going forward that would result in PCOs would be unforeseen conditions or differing site conditions. And those would be stemming from like that water line situation. So that would be hard to predict when, how much we might see from that.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems like Anvil's working all over the city, at least along the Quintana and the conveyance. But is the work going well according to your position? Are things going pretty well, do you think?
In terms of, I will say this, is that this type of construction in an urban environment like this, the type of pipe that was chosen, was selected HDPE, that's challenging in an urban environment. So, and it's challenging from the standpoint of, the fact that we have this joint trench with 3 pipes in it on one side and then the IPR line on the other one. Anvil's had a number of challenges with their labor. They've had some staff turnover. They've made a strong commitment to use local labor, and so there's been people that have had to come onto the project that weren't maybe as skilled or as experienced, but they're learning, and so they've had some challenges with that, which isn't unique to Morro Bay. That's a figment of COVID right now, and it's a lot of the problems that we're seeing industry wide. And with escalation and contractors having a hard time finding labor and finding people who want to work and who are working. So would I say it's going well? I don't know that I would give us an A+ and be high-fiving everyone. There are things that are very typical for underground construction that they're faced with, but there are some other things that I'm seeing that are kind of unusual, and this labor market being one of them. This is very atypical for a construction project to be facing labor issues like we're seeing right now during COVID.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Those are my questions, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Appreciate that. Looking for other council member hands if you have questions. Looking and seeing none. Okay. Paul, I just had a couple of questions. Again, thank you for pinch hitting this evening.
No problem.
I know that's sometimes difficult when you probably didn't expect it, but nonetheless, thanks for a good presentation. Just want to perhaps for the public's standpoint, just briefly vet the elephant in the room, which I believe is on page 177 of the staff report, the description of the changes. and it's the $445,000 item one, the SHPO delay, which I've been through a number of times with staff and you guys, and Councilmember Heller and I have had the privilege of working together on the WRF subcommittee, and so we've probably heard a lot more. But the way I look at it, the first thing I think it's important, because we use a lot of acronyms for the public to know that SHPO is the Office of Historic Preservation for the state of California, and there is a state director that's over that. And I personally had to intervene, as you probably know, in the midst of this issue because of the delay. And the other thing that I think is important to point out is that the interactions between SHPO, or the Office of Historic Preservation, and the city are not really direct. This is really an item that is between the EPA and a SHPO, or the Office of Historic Preservation. Those are the two entities that basically are going back and forth and vetting this, their response plan and the monitoring plan. And EPA then is really the administrator of the WIFIA program, so that people, I think the community understands that the EPA is the entity that provided us with the low interest loan at obviously a tremendously low rate, and that added significant layers of oversight by the federal government to this project. And so with those explanations, I note that the monitoring plan was submitted on 10/3 of 2020. And then in November of 2020, EPA, which is the WIFIA program, sends the document to SHPO. And by what I understand, by law, they're mandated to respond within 30 days. They did not. And in my interaction with the state director, to be really candid with you, the issue, and by the way, the state director was very nice to even speak to me, because again, the relationship is between EPA and the state Historic Preservation Office, not with the city. However, trying to move things along, that conversation resulting in me getting information that there was significant COVID-19 impacts to SHPO that was delaying their ability to respond to projects. And so that came directly from the director. I think it's important to state that. And because of that delay, the one thing I think that's important for the council to see is that Corollo did provide a notice to proceed on the 14th of December of 2020. That was before basically we received the approval from SHPO for the monitoring plan. And my understanding is the rationale behind that was there was a tight schedule to meet, that the 30 days had been exceeded by statute. And as a result of that, it was your meaning Corollo's interpretation that it was appropriate to move forward based upon your understanding that if they exceeded that 30-day limit, that was a green light to move forward with your notice to proceed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then basically EPA finally received, according to your notes, on February 20th of 2021, the EPA received SHPO comments finally. Okay, 2 months later. And as a result of that, immediately or just prior to that, you received this on 2/16 of 21, a stop work order from SHPO, basically, because of the fact that the monitoring plan had not been approved. And then on 3/15, after a second call, and I'm not taking credit for this, I'm just saying, sometimes the squeaky wheel gets action. Finally, on 3/15/21, they approved the monitoring plan. And this all resulted in this extensive 45 or whatever, 43 day delay and a cost of $445,000. And I just wanted to vet that. And I guess I want to ask the question, there is a question in all this. Why do you think, why did Carollo feel comfortable moving forward with an NTP on 12/14/20 without the plan in place?
There are a couple different reasons that we felt comfortable. One is the statute is pretty clear that they, both entities have 30 days. And in many cases, my understanding in talking to Far Western, Phil with Far Western, is there are many agencies that would just simply move forward. And if the 30 days isn't met, then silence is considered acceptance. And we didn't, those activities that were being conducted were not digging pipe. This wasn't going to be putting pipe in the ground. It was going to be in areas where they tested negative, where Anvil would go and pothole utilities. So it wasn't extensive, even groundbreaking or ground disturbing activities. The other thing is, without a notice to proceed, Anvil couldn't order equipment. They couldn't order long lead time items. They couldn't, and so when they were issued notice to proceed, they procured a lot of long lead time items and pipe, which we now know is very, very difficult to get due to COVID disruptions. Obviously, we didn't have the benefit of knowing that at the time, but we felt that it was worth the risk that there would be some, wrench thrown in the works down the way, and that we could work with EPA and the State Historic Preservation Office over maybe the finer details around this, right? If we stay away from the areas that we knew that the testing report or that would be up for discussion with EPA and SHPO, that we could work through those finer details. I think we were all surprised that we got issued a carte blanche, cease and desist, do not do anything anywhere. That was very surprising to us. And we would have felt it was very, very atypical for a reaction from an agency like that.
I appreciate that. I think it was important for the community to understand, because this is, the biggest ticket, or one of the biggest ticket items that may have cause for the most questions. My last question observation is that I guess there's good and bad in working with federal entities that add another layer like the EPA. It's a tremendously positive program that has saved us, probably $30 million on debt service because of our low interest loan. But as we've seen with a number of other areas, is it correct to say that there are multiple other levels federally that kick in with regard to regulatory issues that normally one might not see if just dealing with state agencies?
That is correct. That is correct.
Thanks. That's all the questions I have. Any other council questions? All righty. If not, I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for item C-1 on the agenda. Public comment is now open. And Anthony, do we have any public comments, sir?
Thank you, Mayor. I see Betty Windholtz with her hand up.
Yes. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. This will be my last comment for the evening. I have one question left over from my email, and that is whether the costs that are being proposed tonight or change orders, does that cover what's been going on in front of the coffee company on the roundabout, or is that another change order that's yet to come? That's one question. Another question I have is, where does the City Council stand on the optional task for Far Western? Did you see there are some options there in the report, and whether or not having them work on the what do I want to say, on the injection wells, is that cost coming out of tonight's money, or is that going to be charged to the injection wells? And then a third question would be their work on, well, I guess that's pretty much where are those optional things, whether that will be taken care of through this field, the final injection well field. There's an option there for them to do that. Is that going to be done with this money? The $75,000, so that covers that. And then all the reports that you're talking about, it doesn't seem like they're all being published on the city's website. And will some of these studies be on there? And I'd like to know that. And then just, to reiterate that I feel like if in the beginning, if council had not listened and gotten their clearances from agencies before they got their permit from Coastal, it seems like a lot of this money could have been saved. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Anthony, is there other public comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I see Mike Taylor with his hand raised. Okay, Mike, I'm going to unmute you. You are unmuted.
Maybe left over. Mike, are you wanting to comment?
Yes, I have two questions. One regarding the archaeological and cultural investigations. Were they in the original specification for the project? And if they were, how are they now subject to a change order if the scope has not changed? My second question regards the $450,000 change order, which in my cynical mind seems to be for a 45-day delay for reasons that I don't completely understand because I'm new to the project, but that's about $10,000 a day for doing nothing. So my question is, has the company provided details down to the costs associated for labor, material, and overhead and profit for consideration to the City Council? Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anthony, next public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back to council, try to summarize a few of the questions. Paul, and or maybe other members of the staff first. Do any of these change orders cover, excuse me, the issues surrounding Morro Bay coffee? And I'm not specifically sure which ones, but Paul, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I am.
Go ahead.
So we have not received any, and so I think for the benefit of council familiar with our discussions on the subcommittee, and then also for members of the public, there was quite a bit of activity associated with the microtunnel, the tunneling operation under the roundabout. Started with the old the Anvil's yard where U-Haul is, and we're tunneling over to Las Tunas. The subcontractor encountered ground conditions that stopped forward progress of that machine in two different locations, and so Anvil had to dig down to look at subsurface conditions to determine what was causing that forward progress to be stopped. Our inspectors were on site. We inspected the work, and we were there and present during all that investigative work, and we have not received any claim from Anvil at this point for that work. So that's an ongoing discussion with Anvil, and we just until we see something, we can't really comment on that right now. So no, none of these change orders are related to any of that work that was going on around the roundabout.
Okay, thank you. And then with regard to the amendment number 1 with Cogstone, the $156,000 optional as needed services for cultural resources monitoring and its relation to injection wells. Did you understand the question there?
I did. I didn't quite understand the reference to injection wells. That may just be because I either overlooked something in the scope or whatever. The optional services that from Cogstone, let's separate those two things. Cogstone's optional services are what we asked them to do when we were negotiating that agreement with them. Was we asked them to pull back on some of their assumptions related to schedule. And that meant what they did was they looked at the schedule and said X number of days of digging, assuming X number of monitors present at each one of these sites. And we said, well, we calculate that a little bit differently. We understand that you want to cover yourselves so that we don't have to come back to council for another amendment. So why don't we do this, is to have some city controlled services that would be tied directly to Anvil's schedule. So 4 days of digging and more, then we would come back and work with the city manager or public works director to release those funds based directly on performance of Cogstein and also Anvil's schedule. A similar arrangement was done for Far Western related to the clearance work that is going to happen associated with the pipe bridge. If they run into human remains, that changes their trajectory of their work pretty significantly. And so what we wanted to do was we assumed a certain number, that they may run into a certain number, and then those optional services are for hitting or running into something else that might need to be cleared that would take more of their time. So again, what we wanted to do is to show that, to provide a contract that had a limited release of those funds to consultants, and then tie those optional services to actual increases in scope of work.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And then Betty wanted to make sure, and I agree, that any reports are comprehensively available on the website, and hopefully you can update any of this information will be available as minutes, and or obviously tonight's staff report will be on the website, et cetera, but making sure that that's up to date too. And then
add on the archaeological reports, those will not be publicly available documents. Those are privileged documents that basically archaeologists and Native Americans can view, but not the general public.
Thanks, Rob, for that clarification. I appreciate that very much. And then real quickly, Paul, for the archaeological and cultural item, were they in the original specs for the project? And obviously the scope has changed, but I think the assumption on the caller's part was that the scope hadn't changed, but could you briefly just address that?
Yeah, certainly.
And report, I know, but.
Right, and Mayor, as you indicated in your summary of your understanding of the events and what transpired with that, when the city elected to pursue federal funding, that sent us into another set of requirements that weren't necessarily tied to the pipeline work, right? Originally, and so you think about the pipeline work as just the technical work that needs to be done, and then the EIR, and so it contemplated what was in the EIR, and they approved EIR and other documents. But then when the WIFIA loan program was pursued, then as you indicated, that sent us into a set of requirements that we learned later in the game and in the design through the programmatic agreement.
Right. And I know the answer to the second question, the $450,000 change order with regard to Anvil and labor. Could you just very briefly speak to how you got to calculating those costs and maybe what they included?
Yes. So the I think it's $443,000. When we're negotiating that with Anvil, we have records that our inspectors keep. They have records that they supply to us, tickets and so on. We do a lot of work to cull through that data and that information about what equipment was on site and what personnel was on site. They actually had to send people home, but then there are a number of permanent employees. We would call permanent employees. They'd be here for the office workers for the duration of the project. They can't really send them home because they don't know when that stop work order is going to get lifted. So, they're doing the best they could to stay busy. And we did work with Anvil on this. And we actually, I believe, negotiated about $50,000 or $60,000 of additional charges out of this to say that, hey, they were actually keeping busy doing ABC. And then, so that's the people side of things. And then they have rented equipment. They can't send it back because they've signed a contract with a rental company to have stuff for so long. So they had equipment staged on site that they either rented or owned, and they couldn't send it away. So that's unfortunate in these delay situations, is that the city pays for those delay charges. But one thing that Anvil did not charge the city for is what was called an extended overhead or office, home office charges. It was really confined only to what was here on the ground in Morro Bay.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that very much. With that, we've gone through public comment. Bring it back to council now for recommendation and discussion. Is there a motion or further discussion? All right, I will.
Mayor?
Yes.
Oh, my hand was up for discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's fine.
I forgot to look up for the hand. Thanks.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Heller, I apologize.
Let me just say, this is a tough situation. It's a tough business. This is a tough project. But, based on my experience, which is over 40 years, I just think an error was made by Carollo, an honest one. But I think it's an error when you're dealing with a federal agency and they exceed their statute on how long they're supposed to respond. I think it's unless you sue that federal agency, it's a real mistake to go ahead and assume, well, silence is approval. My experience, silence is not approval with federal agencies. Maybe with a local agency, it might mean that, but it's a huge mistake in my opinion, and I don't think that the residents of Morro Bay should be paying for it. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
You bet. Absolutely. Thank you. Further comments or motion? All righty. Yes. Councilmember Ford, please. Go ahead. Councilmember Ford, yes. I see your hand.
Okay. Yeah.
Your background is almost the same color as your hand. So
sorry, I'll work on that for next week. So I have a question. Councilmember Heller did bring up a good point about, where does responsibility lie? And, we are responsible for the hard-earned tax dollars, of our citizens that live here. So my question is if we were to not pass, if we were to not pay for that, the $443,000. I haven't done it yet. $443,000. What is the consequence? And what other options are there? Is there yeah. Just want more information about that.
Paul, you want to address that, or Greg, or Scott,
or Chris?
Yeah. I'm not sure we want legal advice over the airs, but I will say that maybe hasn't been discussed is if Kroll had not issued that notice to proceed, we'd be looking at a far bigger expense to the city. We would have missed the boat on starting as early as we did, and we'd probably incur some escalation costs related to the COVID-19 impacts. So it's a good question you raised. I don't know if we want to entertain that here, but if they had not done that, we'd be looking at a much bigger bogey right now.
And I do agree with that, having been, as I stated previously, right in the middle of this. It doesn't taste well to me either, Councilmember Heller. I absolutely agree. That's why I went through the timeline and tried to articulate my discussions with the agency, trying to intervene and get this thing moving for us. Unfortunately, the 30-day issue was one that once an agency doesn't meet that 30-day goal, then as Paul was speaking to, then apparently there's an unwritten authorization to move forward, but that's a call by the management company, and it is what it is. My sense is if this isn't approved, that as our city manager said, the costs are going to be much greater, and there could be further delays in the project, and that could be very expensive. So just my opinion. Further discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and move that the City Council authorize the City Manager to execute the following. Amendment number 1 to the agreement with Cogstone Resource Management for cultural resources, monitoring services during construction of the WRF lift station and offsite pipelines for a total amount of $740,803.22, which includes $155,900 70 of optional as-needed services for cultural resources monitoring as directed by the city's Public Works Director, resulting in a total not to exceed amount of $1,005,721.22. Number 2, amendment number 6 to the agreement with Far Western Anthropological Research Group Incorporated for data recovery excavations at Cultural Resources Site, CASLO 16 as identified in the project EIR, also known as Construction Phase 2B of the Conveyance Facilities Project as outlined in the programmatic agreement between the EPA and the state and SHPO regarding the City of Morro Bay WRF project for the amount of $463,086, which includes $146,824 of optional as-needed services for the Phase 2 data recovery excavations as directed by the city's Public Work Director, resulting in a total not to exceed amount of $806,165.01. And 3, authorize the city manager to execute contract change order number 1 to the agreement with Anvil Builders for construction of the WRF conveyance facilities for the amount of $674,485, resulting in a total not to exceed amount of $32,168,160.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mayor Heading for the staff recommendation, seconded by Councilmember Barton. I will state further that this will not impact the ratepayers' rates at this time. I want to make that very clear, and does fall at least within the limited contingency that we do have for these items. So, motion by Councilmember Mayor Heading, and seconded by Councilmember Barton. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yeah.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
No.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item C-2. This is our second business item of the evening. This is to receive SB 1383, a short-lived climate pollutants, organics waste reductions update, and consider adopting resolution number 69-21, reaffirming our commitment to remain a member of the San Luis Obispo County Integrated Waste Management Authority. And Mr. Kwolek, you are up again. This is your third at bat for the evening. So far, you have 3 balls and 1 strike. All right.
Looks like it. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, City Council members. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Just one moment. So this presentation is on item C2. It's the update on 1383. This is the bill on short-lived climate pollutants. For the city, this is really about recycling organics and properly disposing of organics. And while I will be giving this presentation, we also have the interim executive director of the IWMA, the Integrated Waste Management Authority, on standby in case there's any questions about process. So this is a lot of information. If you read the report, there's just a lot in there encompassing there's many different facets of this bill. It's going to be going into effect in January. So I did my best with this presentation to present it in a logical order, starting with the when, and then the whys, and then the hows. So nevertheless, if you have questions, I'll take them at the end. So why isn't this working? There we go. So, and I'm assuming you can all see this. The timeline started in 2016, as far as we're concerned. SB 1383 was passed into law, and initially they had an ambitious goal of a 50% reduction of landfilled organic waste. That didn't happen because actually the state did not disseminate the final regulations until November of 2020. And so that was during the pandemic. And since then, jurisdictions have been working on interpreting these regulations and developing processes so that we can all be ready when the law takes effect in a few short months on January 1st of 2022. So just a brief overview of what these regulations will be. So there will be organics collection service to all residents and businesses, an edible food recovery program, education and outreach. There will be some new procurement standards and monitoring compliance and code enforcement. So it's important to note that local governments won't have to enforce the SB 1383 requirements until January 1st, 2024. So there's a sort of a 2-year bridge period where we are implementing it all and we're educating the public and doing outreach, but we're not going to do anything with it quite such a heavy hand for 2 years. And then there are some targets. By 2025, the target is a 75% reduction in landfilled organic waste and also a 20% increase in recovery of currently disposed edible food. So let's talk about why this is even happening. Organic waste in California is a pretty serious problem. We, as a state, we disposed of approximately 27 million tons of organic waste in 2017. 6 million tons of food waste is thrown away every year. And 1 in 5 children and 1 in 8 Californians are food insecure. Just a little bit more on that. So organic waste in a landfill produces methane gas, and this is the big issue that this law is trying to solve. So methane gas is more powerful than CO2. It's emitted by landfilled organic waste, and it has many contributions to climate change, which, as we know, looks like it's going to be a city council goal. So these contributions include rising sea levels, reduced snowpack, wildfires, drought, and heat waves. So that's some of the whys. Now let's talk about how this is going to work. The big one is all residents and businesses will now have a 3-container collection service. So we already have a 3-container service, and those colors of bins you see there on your screen, the green, blue, and gray, it's going to be the same. But what goes into those is going to be a little bit different. So I'll go through the slide, and then I'll give the example that helped me make sense of this. So one important note is that the use of that green bin is going to be mandatory. It's not a voluntary system. And all organic waste will be segregated for collection and recycling. So in the green container, it will be limited to food waste, yard waste, green waste, and other organic materials, including soiled paper. So that's a change. Right now, you would just throw soiled paper into the gray bin directly into the trash, but now that will go into the green container. And also food waste. Right now, like leafy food waste would go into the green bin, grass clippings, etc. Well, after January, you'll be putting your chicken bones and essentially everything that has to do with food waste would now go into the green bin. The blue container, not much of a change there. That's going to be your traditional recyclables, bottles, cans, plastic, and organic waste such as clean paper and cardboard, not just any paper and cardboard. And then the gray container is going to be what is not recyclable. So you can't put organics in there. My example is pizza. I eat a lot of pizza being from the East Coast. And so right now, if you take your pizza box, the bottom part of the pizza box is usually all greased up, and the top part is usually clean. So being the good citizen that I am, I cut my pizza box in half. Right now, I put the clean cardboard into the blue bin, and the rest I throw directly in the trash. Well, with this new law, you will put the greasy side of the pizza box into the green bin, because that's organic, and you can still put the clean side of the pizza box into the blue bin. Really, the only thing you'd be putting into the trash if you're eating pizza is that piece of wax paper. So there will be some waivers. So collection waivers would be handled by the IWMA, or I should be more specific, we will be proposing that the IWMA will handle waivers for the city of Morro Bay. And I'll just say, wherever you see IWMA in this presentation, we have not officially designated IWMA as the agency to do this, but staff will be bringing that request to City Council at a future meeting. So moving on, the collection waivers are authorized for documented circumstances. One of them is a de minimis circumstance where a customer just doesn't produce any organic waste at all. One example of this might be, an office building that no one is renting. And then if there's space constraints, that might be an issue along the Embarcadero. So that remains to be seen. Moving on, how do people find out about what exactly needs to go into these bins and how this all works? Well, education and outreach is going to be handled by the IWMA, or again, that's what the city will be proposing at a later meeting. So we hope to educate all organic waste generators, commercial edible food generators, and self-haulers about relevant SB 1383 requirements. Education outreach for businesses and residents will include collection and service requirements, contamination standards, self-haul requirements, and overall compliance with SB 1383. And then education and outreach for commercial edible food generators will include edible food donation requirements and available food recovery organizations. And there will be a later slide on the edible food recovery. So that's education and outreach, again, handled by the IWMA. What about compliance and enforcement? The state law requires that local governments be the responsible party for enforcement. But helping out with compliance is not something that has to be done by local governments. So again, the city will be proposing that compliance monitoring and education will be handled by IWMA. So the first thing we'll need to do is adopt an ordinance, and that'll be the enforceable mechanism when it comes to enforcement. And as I mentioned earlier, we have this 2-year bridge period where compliance monitoring and education will be done so that folks have a better understanding of what the requirements are. That will include, by the IWMA, annual compliance reviews, route reviews, and inspections. So for example, in front of the waste collection trucks, maybe an IWMA vehicle all over parts of the county that IWMA will cover, where there will be someone, hopping out of a car, lifting up the lids and making sure that the right solid waste is in the right container. And if a ratepayer, if a customer does not have, their pizza box elements in the right containers, then there will be some informal notification to that ratepayer, as well as some education there. The idea is to educate violators, not to hit them strong. However, in 2024 and beyond, we'll be moving into compliance monitoring and enforcement. We'll still have the reviews, the route reviews, the inspections, but now as IWMA finds residents that are not in compliance, they will send them formal notices. And eventually, and some of this is yet to be determined, but eventually then those violators will be forwarded to the city, and then the code enforcement process will take place. But again, the intention is not to apply fees. We don't want to take a punitive approach. We just want to make sure that people fully understand what items need to go in which bins. Next, we'll move on to the edible food recovery program. This is a different component of SB 1383. Again, this is a program that the city will be proposing that IWMA manages. So first, I'll just explain generally what edible food recovery is. A lot of edible food is thrown away in the state. And so these regulations try to find that connection between, what food can we save, and then where are the hungry mouths? Where can we give it where it'll have some benefit? So the IWMA would be identifying tier 1 and tier 2 commercial edible food generators. to educate on the requirements of this program, as well as what food recovery organizations and services are available locally. And then it'll be the responsibility of those generators to connect with those food recovery organizations and services. Just to give you an idea, Tier 1, that is going to be your big grocery store, supermarket. I believe the threshold is over 10,000 square feet. That is not necessarily going to be your mom and pop restaurants or even small bakeries or anything like that. Tier 2 is going to be even bigger. That's like a stadium that may have an event where they brought a whole bunch of food, and if it's not used, it's going to be thrown away. So a lot of this will probably not apply to the city of Morro Bay. Some of it will, certainly the Tier 1, perhaps Albertsons and maybe Spencer's. And, we may ask potentially, for voluntary participation, or we may hear from businesses that want to voluntarily participate in this program only because of the value that it brings. Also, IWMA will maintain a list of food recovery organizations, and then they'll monitor commercial edible food generators for compliance. Another piece of this legislation is the procurement target that will require us to use recycled organic products. So we will have a minimum procurement target of recovered organic waste. That could include compost and mulch. It could include the city buying or using renewable natural gas or electricity from biomass. So important to this is that our procurement target will be set by a state formula based on our population. And, right now, just on a positive note, it looks like our waste collection trucks, if they're not already, will be using RNG, renewable natural gas. And so it's possible that we will either already be meeting our procurement target here in Morro Bay because our waste company is a bit ahead of the game in this. Or if not meeting it, then we will be close. And we may be able to meet that then by purchasing compost and mulch for our parks. In addition, there will be some paper procurement requirements. These paper purchases must contain 30% post-consumer recycled content when available at the same price or less than virgin material. Virgin material meaning paper that's made of product that has never been recycled. Products, importantly, must meet FTC recyclability guidelines. So that is going to be implemented by our procurement staff here in the city. It also applies to, beyond copy paper, it also applies to toiletries and things like that. So tissue paper, toilet paper, et cetera, would have to contain 30% post-consumer recycled content. There's also some record keeping and reporting mandates. IWMA will be a sort of clearinghouse for this in the region for its member agencies, but the city, in some cases, will be providing the initial data for this record keeping and reporting. So IWMA will be required to maintain all information on various requirements of SB 1383 implementation, such as organic collection services and the hauler program, contamination monitoring and waivers, education and outreach, edible food recovery, recycled organic waste, and recycled paper procurement. That's something that the city would be providing to the IWMA, and city inspection and enforcement. This record keeping has to be accessible to CalRecycle staff at the state within 10 business days and also retained for 5 years. And CalRecycle can review IWMA implementation record as part of a program audit. And finally, reporting to CalRecycle. Let me just move my thing here. The initial compliance report will be due on April 1st, 2022, and then an annual SB 1383 compliance report will be required, the first one being due October 1st, 2022, and then August 1st annually thereafter. You may have noticed in the staff report that there is a discussion about potential fee changes. These are very likely, if not certain at this point. So staff anticipates 3 fee changes for SB 1383 implementation. So fee increases would include the IWMA. The IWMA, obviously, we saw their name pop up a lot in this presentation. That's because they'll be taking on a lot more work, and that will require staff time and resources. So we are expecting a fee increase from them within a month or two. They did pass a fee increase for SB 1383 implementation back in June, but that was prior to the county withdrawing from that agency. And so they are in the process of recalculating what that fee increase will be. Also, our franchise hauler fee will be required to do more as a result of SB 1383, and therefore we'll have to increase fees to recover those costs. We don't know quite when to expect to see a request for that fee increase, but I'd also just like to say that we do expect other fee increases from them as well, including a potential fee increase for their anaerobic digester, an escalator increase on their existing fee, and the potential negotiation for an increased base fee. So, rates are expected to go up. And I already mentioned that we should see all of those fees by the end of next calendar year. New fees could include a city fee. As indicated in the staff report, the city will be taking on some additional costs, specifically with procurement, reporting, monitoring, and certainly with enforcement. Not all of these costs will come into play right away because enforcement won't start for another 2 years and 3 months. However, the city certainly has an option of creating a SB 1383 fee in the near term to recover the cost that we expect in the near term. And fee changes will necessitate the city working with hauler on timing for when to conduct the Prop 218 process. So just on that quickly, these fee increases, all of them, will require a Prop 218 process, which is a public hearing that has to come to council and has some regulations on how that public hearing is noticed. And there is an open question of, do we want to try to align the city's fee increase if we go in that direction with the hauler's fee increase or with the IWMA's fee increase, so that we simply burden the public less by bringing all these 218s. Another take on this is staff at this time has not conducted a full analysis on what our increased costs will be as they relate to SB 1383. And in many ways, we can't really know yet until we're in it. There are certain things that we just can't project yet. And so we are seeking some direction from council on whether we can go ahead and start conducting that analysis and bring it to council when it's ready, in addition with a recommendation on when to, or if we should align our 218 fee increase process with one of the other agencies. So to the recommendation slide, again, receive SB 1383 update and provide comments or direction to staff. And as I just mentioned, we are looking for council to direct staff to analyze the cost impact of the city to implement SB 1383 and bring forward a recommendation to fund these additional costs. And then finally, to adopt a resolution number 6921. This did not come up in the presentation, but the idea is to reaffirm our commitment to remain a member of the San Luis Obispo County Integrated Waste Management Authority. So that concludes the presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Hey, Greg, thanks for simplifying a very complicated change in law for us. I love the pizza example. The top of mine always touches the cheese, and so I guess I don't qualify like you do. But anyway, I think that was a great analogy. I really appreciate your presentation. I'll tell you, I would be remiss if I didn't state my complete displeasure at the San Luis Obispo Board of Supervisors deciding to leave the Integrated Waste Management Authority. I don't know what the burden will be on communities like ours, but it can't do anything but increase costs for both agencies, in my opinion. sorry for that editorial comment. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for any council member questions. And let me just thank Councilmember Heller first for being our MWA representative. Jeff, thanks so much for your continuous updates at council meetings. We very much appreciate that. And you're advocating for our city and trying to keep sanity where it has been difficult maybe with the group, not you personally, obviously, but the group per se. So in all seriousness and all candor, thank you for working through those issues. Councilmember Ford, I see your hand. Please, ma'am, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Wallach. And I really appreciate this detailed report. And all the reports this evening have been so amazing that I don't have a whole lot of questions tonight. But I didn't catch, was there somewhere in the report, or maybe I can just find it online, but the amount of methane that we're trying to reduce, is there an exact number or percentage, like 30%, or what are we trying to reduce with all of these items implemented that were just mentioned?
You want me to jump in and answer that, Greg?
Sure. I just want to thank Councilmember Ford for her question. In the beginning of the report, we did mention that we wanted to reduce 50% of landfilled organic waste. We didn't mention the methane, but before I kick it over to Ms. Taves, I do want to put out a big thank you to Janine Burlingame, who has been a longtime management analyst here at the city. She was really integral in creating this report and presentation, and also has been following this issue for several years. So I just wanted to acknowledge her contributions to this. So yeah, Patty, if you want to take that question on.
You're welcome, Patty.
Thank you. Well, the estimates are that it's supposed to reduce it by 40%. So statewide emissions, okay? So that's significant. It's almost, when you think about it, 50% of what we produce is the estimate that again, it's 40%. So it's significant.
Thank you for that, both of you.
Other council questions? Okay, seeing no hands. Oh, Councilmember Heller. Yes, of course, sir.
All right, a little late there.
Yeah.
So, Greg, excellent report. Patty, great seeing you as always.
Thank you.
A question about, I had heard that Atascadero has cameras on some of their trucks, and I'm wondering if either of you know about that, and if that's for recycling, or if that's for organic waste, or if it's a myth.
I'll jump in and answer that. It's not a myth. They do have cameras on their trucks. Waste Management has cameras almost in all of their locations statewide. They do have challenges with the residential portion of the camera because, as you can imagine, when you go into cul-de-sacs, all the cards get mixed up, and they aren't done by a tag system, so an IFD tag, so that it's difficult to see if you do find contamination in tight container situations on really getting to the source of the problem. So they kind of hold off on the residential outreach enforcement, but when it comes to commercial, it's much more effective because the containers are usually separated.
So they mostly use that or apply that code enforcement to commercial clients. And is that recycled, do you know, Patty, or is that the organic waste? Or
it is both recycling and organic waste.
Okay.
And it's fun to watch. If you ever get a chance, they'll let you take a look at what comes in on their camera systems. I mean, there's ironing boards in the green bin, vacuum cleaners in the green bin. I mean, it's just amazing what people put into these bins. So it's really helpful so that they can see it right away, call the customer right away, follow up, say, hey, we've seen this. We're noting it on your account. Please don't do it again. So many times we're going to have to actually send out an increased rate fine. So
I'm fascinated by what people have in their trash containers, so I'd like to see some of those clips. Can we take a break because I've got a pizza man at the front door? I ordered some. I'm just joking about that. Those are my questions. Patty, thanks so much for joining us, and Greg, thanks for an awesome report.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Councilmember Heller. Other council questions?
I'm curious about the
Councilmember Barton, I see you there.
Yes. I'm curious about dealing with the some of the organics that are kind of smelly. So if Greg eats a lot of pizza, I eat a lot of chicken, and so chicken does not smell nice after a few days. And I'm just wondering, are there going to be helpful suggestions for how to deal with stinky stuff? So.
We do have a lot of helpful suggestions on that. And, it's really individual. Some people take and freeze their items, and then on their day of service, they drop it as one frozen lump into their bin. Other people actually like to keep it in the refrigerator. Other people are repulsed by that. We have a lot of people who go to Costco and buy big bags of baking soda, sprinkle a little bit in the bottom to absorb moisture and odors, and then throw in their food waste and then sprinkle a little bit on top. So give our agency a call. We're here to help you work through any issues. Again, it's unique to whoever you are and what you're actually producing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question. Okay, seeing no further questions, I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for agenda item C-2. Excuse me, any member of the public wishing to speak, please do so now. And Anthony, go ahead and open up public comment. Do we have anybody in the queue?
I thank you, Mayor. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay. Go ahead and close public comment on item C-2, bring it back to council, and either entertain a motion or any further discussion on that. Councilmember Heller, our lead liaison.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, unless we're going to talk about spoiled chicken, I'd like to go ahead and move that we accept staff's recommendation. And is that all I need to say, Mayor, or do I need to detail?
Yeah, no, you can say I read it, but that's just because, I
don't have it in front of me.
I'm AR, so no worries. Staff recommendation is fine. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by council member to approve staff recommendation. Second by council member Addis. And is there any further discussion?
I have a couple comments, Mayor.
Yes, please, Councilmember Addis.
Well, one, I want to thank Councilmember Heller for talking about this issue almost every time we meet. I appreciate that advocacy, and he's going to join me on Afternoons with Addis on December 6th at 5:30 to 6 p.m. via Zoom to talk about IWMA and this particular issue with a presentation that he's given to a number of other groups. And as his alternate on the IWMA, I wanted to invite him to share this with a wider audience. So I hope folks will join us on December 6th at 5:30. And in response to Councilmember Barton's comments, because this keeps getting brought up, I finally bought a canister on Amazon. And it comes with 2 carbon filters that help reduce smell. So we're waiting for that in the mail, and I'm sure you can buy it from other local vendors, but we did go the easy one-click route on Amazon. But it's stainless steel, and it matches our kitchen appliances and fits right in. And so you can Google those for the kitchen top and get the double carbon filters that are replaceable that help cut down on the smell. And I, too, am dismayed that the county has left IWMA because I'm concerned about costs to residents. But I do think it was the quickest way for the rest of us to get back on track. It is my hope that we as a city do whatever we can to reduce costs. I know they're going to go up. I know that that is because of the county supervisor's poor decision, but I also feel like I'd like us to do anything we can here locally to reduce costs that we know are coming. And I don't have the answers for that. It's just my wish that staff be thinking along those lines. So thank you.
Great comments. Thank you for that. I'll just add, and again, my thanks, Greg, for all of your work and a great presentation. but also I think the importance, which is obvious, of educating the community on all of these changes is going to be critical. And so I think the development of a really stellar, robust communications plan will be important to this initiative. I mean, I had to read this 2 or 3 times to really kind of get the essence of all of this. And then there are a whole bunch of opportunities to really make some effective changes in the way we handle organic waste. That's going to require significant education to our community. So any way that MWA can be involved with that and passing their knowledge down, and or us locally as a jurisdiction, making sure that that happens, I would just like to make that comment and add that to it. So we do have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no hands, I'll go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis? Yes. Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And thank you again, Patty, for being here.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, that moves us to item D, council declaration of future agenda items. Anything for the greater good. We do have goals coming up, I believe, next meeting, and that will flush out a lot of stuff. Anything? Okay, hearing none.
I have, Mayor, my hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Heller,
okay.
I missed it. It's up in the sky.
I'm a little slow.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I was wondering if the council might consider a future agenda item. I've been getting a number of calls from constituents here regarding Natural Healing Center as a result of the legal action going on in San Luis Obispo and the facility there. And I know that we had a thorough vetting process here, and we actually had some legal action that took place about permitting the centers that we have here in Morro Bay. But I've had questions about, is there something the city needs to do more at this point? Are we done? Does what happened in San Luis Obispo apply to Morro Bay? Are there any issues here that we need to discuss? So I'd like to suggest that staff take a look at that and bring something back to the council addressing that general issue.
I appreciate that. I'm seeing, looking for all heads, but I see Councilmember Ford's head nodding yes. And personally, I do believe we're due for an update both on the litigation and the thorough vetting process that we went through and where that stands at present too. So I would support that.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, the city right now is doing an internal review of the process. It has not been concluded yet. Depending upon the nature of the conclusion, we may go into closed session concerning the results of that report. We may just release the report, but given that the review is pending right now, city staff at this point, I would advise wouldn't want to comment on the review until it's done.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's a piece of it. Thank you, Chris, for that. And perhaps as we get through that and we receive that report, then we would be able to ascertain whether this would be an appropriate item to come forward, although we are generally looking for some information on, what the city has done, is doing, if it's reportable. So
yes, my office and Community Development Department and City Manager's office, the matter is being reviewed right now. So we'll update council as appropriate and as needed, and also as soon as we can, we'll make any conclusions available to the public.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Heller, if that works, I think I would support that.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that that's underway, and that's all I needed to hear.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Seeing no other items, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. The next regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Morro Bay will be held on Tuesday, October the 26th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. via teleconference. Thank you. Be safe, be well, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Let's get some pizza.